Today's video is about what if Naruto became Hokage to ensure no child ever faces life as an orphan. Like and subscribe. The moon hung in the night sky over a serene and peaceful Konoha. Its bright light was smothered under the thick clouds that loomed over the quiet village. Leaves danced in the air as a calm and cool breeze carried them through the streets. Hiruzen had enjoyed yet another day away from the title of Kage. He took another long drag from his tobacco pipe while he sat on the balcony of his home next to painting of his beautiful village. It had been 5 years already since he gave it away, and even though he adored serving his home, he had no issues admitting that he equally loved retirement. Their day was amazing or even eventful, but most of the time they were relaxing. So far, Hiruzen could say that retirement had treated him well. It did have faults that blew extra years on his life though. The falling out between him and his star pupil, Orochimaru, had left some permanent scars on him. More importantly, it had also injured the productivity and safe with the fracturing of the legendary Sannin. Still, that ordeal had been over 3 years ago now, and while scars don't go away, the wounds heal themselves over time. Konoha had truly begun to repair itself. Astonishing to Hiruzen, even though Orochimaru had tarnished his legacy and became an infamous criminal, and even though Tsunade had abandoned the leaf alto of fire still managed to persist without them. Hiruzen eyed the next gap to fill on his canvas and exhaled the tobacco he'd been holding within. The white smoke lazily pooled out of his mouth and wrapped around. He then sized up his reference, the Hokage monument. Before he began, he smiled. The smoke reminded him of how the monument looked during those misty Sioux mornings, where the base of the mountain was covered in fog before the bright sun had time to burn it off. Hiruzen retrieved his color palette and dipped his small brush into an earthy tan shade of brown before he committed to a long series of short, intricate strokes. He then paused to examine his work. A smirk curved on his lips. "Heh, I think I got your features down pretty good, Minato," he mumbled proudly to himself. He looked back to the notorious monument. A thoughtful glint shined in his eyes. "I wonder about whose face will accompany ours after you retire," he said. "I trust make the right decision." Hiruzen looked at the canvas again to add to his art piece. He dunked his brush in a bucket of water to clean it. Suddenly, the water in the bucket began to shake V-splash everywhere. Hiruzen's canvas fell onto the ground. He felt the chaotic vibrations underneath his seat and braced himself, grabbing onto the railings of his bed. Konoha doesn't get earthquakes, he thought with gritted teeth. The violent tremors ceased. Hiruzen leapt to his feet as he scanned the condition of his village. What could have caused that? Looking over the leaf, his question had swiftly received an answer. In the center of Konoha was a billowing white plume of smoke that swallowed the middle of the tower into the sky. Hiruzen's face became pale. "What the hell is that?" he thought while he maintained an intense stare trying to figure out what caused this sudden anomaly. In rapid succession, 9 enormous tails coated in red-orange fur pierced the smoke screen. They whipped and lashed throughout the surrounding buildings and obliterating them into rubble without effort. Hiruzen was filled with dread and paled at the sight. "It can't be," he thought with beads of sweat forming on his brow. "What has happened to Kushina for the 9 out? Minato assured me that he'd personally oversee that the birth went over smoothly." His wrinkled face formed a scowl when the building-sized hand of the QB tore the entire top half off an apartment complex from its base and threw it. Hiruzen wa as the several stories of the building soared across the sky and over him like a meteor before it crashed into his clan's estate. A shockwave reverberated from the imhim. Windows shattered as the concussive force threw him against the balcony railing. He scrambled to his feet and dashed into his bedroom, toward his quaint wardrobe. The family portrait of his wife and son caught his attention from the bedside. Nig hesitated to go looking for them but brushed his familial worries aside. "I have to go out there and do something about the fox," he concluded as he scrambled to pee. Resolve set in as he wrapped himself in his infamous ninja attire. A full-body, charcoal black suit over a layer of chainmail that was exposed at his wrists and ankles strapped a dark green armored bracer over his right forearm. At his waist was a blue band that hugged his bodysuit to his person. A dark green Kabuto helmet residential head. Over the top of the helmet was a black bandana-style leaf head protector tied together with straps that were so long they straddled the floor. When Hiruzen W his back was a white patch that began at the front of his shoulders. Engraved in the white patch was the kanji for fire. Hiruzen then finally wriggled his feet into H sandals. "Now time for some assistance," Hiruzen thought. He bit into the tip of his thumb and flew through hand signs faster than the eyes could follow before finishing with he could hear someone running throughout his home and up the hallway to his bedroom door. Konoha Jonin rushed into the room. Hiruzen did not turn to acknowledge him. Lord Third, the nine-tailed fox is running rampant through the village. We need he cried frantically. Don't worry, son, Hiruzen said with a calm but stern voice. Hiruzen knelt down to the ground and slammed his palm onto the floor. Ha! The Jonin blurted out in confusion. A vast array of complex patterns spread across the floor in a circular shape. Then a puff of white smoke consumed Hiruzen. Before the Jonin could ask what he was, swiped the smoke away with one swift swing of his notorious monkey staff. He held the almost pillar-sized black staff with golden ends under his right arm and faced the Konoha Jonin with a threatening mug of determination. I will protect this village, Hiruzen declared. Yes, Lord Third. The Jonin stiffened, fighting off a look of wonder and amazement at the battle-ready Hokage. Browse just in community forum beta's story anime/manga/anime/Naruto/anime/Naruto/plus. Do whatever you can to locate Jiraiya or Minato and get them to me, Hiruzen ordered as he dashed for his balcony. He didn't have time to waste, but he had not a fresh rendition of Minato's face on the monument he had just painted had been smudged beyond recognition, and even got all over his own face on the Hokage Emo. Hiruzen couldn't help but shove his worst thoughts away. They'd only make him hesitate in battle. He can't be concerned with Minato or Kushina now. He has to def. He stepped onto the balcony's guardrail and steeled his nerves as he glared at the rampaging demon fox. He had to trust that Minato was handling himself, for the Hiruzen leaped from the balcony and into the sky with a masterful degree of flexibility. He pointed his staff at the ground. Extend! He commanded it while falling from the sky. The end of the staff shot at the ground instantaneously, digging itself into the dirt at least a foot. The other end of the staff lengthened into the sky, carrying Hiruzen higher up. The top of his Kabuto helmet scraped the bottom of the clouds before he pivoted his weight forward toward the nine-tailed demon fox. He was soaring down to the village. You can't have my village, Hiruzen thought from the skies as his staff abruptly shrank to its original size. The beast was only 100 meters away from him. No. He held the heavy monkey staff over his head and flung his weapon downward with all of his might. The staff snapped down as he allowed it to extend several times size in length towards the fox, and it plunged through the air. Wham! The end of his monkey staff cracked over the head of the rampaging Ninetails and slammed its face into the ground, forming a small crater. Hiruzen landed gracefully in the street as his staff retreated into its normal state. Lord Hokage, it's the Sandame. Hiruzen is here. Hiruzen could hear several civilians and shinobi take notice of him from where he stood. Gotta contain the beast, he realized. His hands sprung into motion, forming an elaborate set of seals in only a fraction of a second. Earth style. Great binding a jutsu, he exclaimed as he firmly stomped the ground with his right foot. Giant earthly chains shot from the ground, wrapping around the fox's legs, tails, and snapping closed around its throat, successfully restraining the writhing behem surface. Lord Hiruzen! Two familiar voices called to him from his side. He turned to identify them. Ah, Shikaku and Choza. Do you have any idea about Minato's situation? Hiruzen inquired with a serious expression. No clue, Lord Third, Choza replied with a stressed air about him. Hiruzen narrowed his gaze on Shikaku expectantly for a reply. The Nara shrugged his shoulders. It can't be helped then, Hiruzen uttered with a tired sigh. We'll just have to make do without him, he stated. So what should we do, Hiruzen? Choza inquired of him. Hiruzen racked his brain for the best course of action. With the stillness that hung in the air, Hiruzen was able to assess the state of his village. His old eyes scanned over the toppled, burning buildings. They reminded him of older times, of all the countless villages he watched burn down before him as a youth serving in the Land of Lightning during the Second Great Ninja War. Worst yet, the mangled and deformed bodies of his people and comrades that speckled the area similarly aroused memories of the past. The screams, the cries, the just too much for a man like him. Lord Third? A voice uttered which dragged Hiruzen out of his thoughts. His head whipped around to the voice. Shikaku was planted next to him with a worried expression. Hiruzen realized that he had lost his train of thought. I'm fine, reassured his former advisor, which seemed to quell the Nara's concerns. Hiruzen stiffened his shoulders and steeled his nerves. We have to focus on getting the N outside of the village. I'm excited to hear your idea about how we go about doing that, Shikaku stated with a curious edge. First, we need to evacuate the civilians to safety, Hiruzen explained with emphasis. Up there, Choza exclaimed and pointed to the closest shinobi in the area, perched on top of a half-destroyed tower. Hiruzen nodded at the Akimichi in understanding before he planted Enma into the ground, hugged his staff to his person, and wrapped his leg around the staff. No declared. The staff shot upward with Hiruzen in tow. He used his weight to lean his staff toward the unsuspecting shinobi before swooping down next to him. Gather the off area and start evacuating the citizens, Hiruzen ordered the ninja. The young shinobi gasped, startled by the sudden presence of the third. The ninja halted his complex string of hand signs and saluted his superior. Yes, Lord Hiruzen. The ninja then leapt away to a new group of shinobi. Hiruzen waved Shikaku and Choza over to him, where they subsequently joined him atop the dilapidated tower. He focused intently on the shackled beast below. He felt unease in watching it writhe uncontrollably in his jutsu and growl like a deranged animal. Now we have to from the village, Hiruzen revealed. The Akimichi scratched the top of his head in contemplation. Do you have any ideas, Shikaku? He asked in forfeit. Shikaku's gaze was sternly focused on the Nine Tails. Look at how uncontrolled it is, the Nara said in regard to the fox's barely contained outburst. It's almost like the QB isn't thinking at all, Shikaku inferred. Perhaps it has already tired itself out against our other ninjas? Choza offered in retort. I doubt that, Shikaku shot back. Humph, Hiruzen mused with a frown. It doesn't matter. We can just exploit this weakness to our advantage, he concluded. So what do we do then? Choza asked. Watch out, Shikaku warned. The crumbling of solid rock could be heard tumbling against the surface. Hiruzen's attention snapped onto the Nine Tails, which had broken free of his jutsu. It snarled at the trio, who narrowly dispersed in time to avoid a painful death. Choza, you know what to do, Shikaku shouted to his comrade. Right. The Akimichi's hands snapped together to form a seal. Expansion jutsu. Hiruzen watched hot wisps of white steam roll off Choza's body before bursting from his person and covering him in a billowing cloud of mist. Choza dashed out from the dancing pillar of steam with booming footsteps. He now towered over his peers at an astonishing 15 meters tall. His very mass had expanded and grown so exponentially that Choza had become a giant almost the size of the colossal Nine Tails itself. Clawed fingers locked with bare hands as Choza engaged the raging fox. Try to force it out of the village, Shikaku instructed his teammate from below. Hiruzen sprinted to reposition himself behind the demon while the Akimichi grappled with it and its intense rage, struggling to gain leverage. As the QB fended off the giant shinobi, Hiruzen halted at the back end of the fox. He threw his adamantine staff over his shoulder and heaved a deep breath Bifo staff with all of his might. It extended at breakneck speeds as it flew through the air before slamming into the hind legs of the fox. The demon's bones groaned fro overbearing attack and its legs buckled beneath it. Now that the giant had toppled over itself, Choza was swift to take advantage, swooping down on the fox from behind and restraining its waving arms. Hiruzen observed the Akimichi nervously when he summoned all of his strength and lifted the writhing demon into the skies, throwing it over his shoulder as far as he could. That'll surely get the demon out of the village, Hiruzen thought victoriously. The fox howled at the top of its lungs while it soared through the sky before crashing into a nearby forest just clear of the village walls. Chase the fox. Choza will catch up with us, Hiruzen ordered Shikaku with urgency. At least it's out of the urban part of the village now, Shikaku remarked by Hiruzen's side while they raced to close the distance between them and the Nine Tails. We just have to try and keep it there, Hiruzen stated with no small amount of stress teeming from his voice. The duo dashed to the top of a tall tree to get a good look at their adversary. Its massive body had totally splintered and felled the trees beneath it, and it laid in the crater it formed. Get ready, Hiruzen warned when the beast sluggishly began to recollect itself. Its massive hands crushed the trees beneath them while it slowly pulled itself from. I'll try restraining it with my shadow. Then you can crack it over the head with that staff and put it to sleep, Shikaku suggested hastily. Not exactly your most well-thought-out plan, Hiruzen noted with a smidgen of concern. Are you sure there is no other way to get rid of it without trying to engage? Shikaku rejected Hiruzen's sentiments with a nod, much to his displeasure. Minato and Jiraiya are missing, and they are the only people that could remove the Q area swiftly, the Nara tactician explained. We can't use Choza to move the fox away because it would destroy the village in the process. Hiruzen sighed with a dejected frown. We can't beat it in a battle of attrition either, he realized. I guess a knockout blow will have to do, he said resolutely. All right then, let's do this, Shikaku said. I'll need you to draw it in for my shadow to reach, the Nara informed Hiruzen. Hiruzen merely chuckled indignantly with a tired grin. And here I thought these restless days were finally behind me, he mumbled with a hint of bitterness. How he didn't even wait for Shikaku to respond. He hopped down from the tree and into the Kyuubi's path of destruction. He ran into the new clearing in the forest and La Biju, which was still getting its bearings. Hiruzen held his staff to his side and raised his right hand to his front before making a single hand sign. He focused his chakra expertly, like the other tens of thous he had done this. In an instant, 2 smokeless shadow clones poofed into existence. The real Hiruzen retrieved a trusty Fuma shuriken from one of the seals on his wrist guard. He reeled it back and then slung it toward the fox with great effort. Each clone sped through hand signs simultaneously with the original, who completed his jutsu first. Multi-shuriken shadow clone jutsu, he exclaimed as one Fuma shuriken quickly became 100 projectiles soaring at the none the wiser fox. Lightning style, piercing electric shock, the next clone proclaimed to his right before using his fingertips to zap a Fuma shuriken with a blue bolt of lightning that to the shurikens, shrouding many of them in blankets of crackling plasma. Wind style, slicing wind torrents, the final clone said as it gulped down a large breath and blew out a violent wave of gales that swept over many of the Fuma, teaching them to spin much faster and more accurately. The fox was met with a downpour of massive shurikens slicing into the right side of its entire body. Hiruzen observed with a stern expression as the lightning-tipped assaulted the demon caused it to writhe and spasm in shock. Its eyes shut tight in pain from the wind-coated shuriken cutting deep into the muscles and tendons. The fox heaved in distress before the massive blade's effect began to wear off, and it was already beginning to repair itself. Its blood-red eyes shot open in the direct shuriken pelted it from. Hiruzen grit his teeth and shuddered at the pure, feral hatred that emanated from the Nine-Tails' crippling roar. Now that I've made myself known, Hiruzen thought while he turned away and ran for it. He dashed through the clearing. The leaves danced in the trail of wind. But the fox trailed him like he was wounded prey. The ground quaked beneath Hiruzen's feet from the lumbering fox's giant size. He narrowly escaped the clearing before the fox could bite him in two. Its jaws snapped, clamping shut to try and catch Hiruzen's heels. He took to the trees, leaping from branch to branch as one tree after another succumbed to the Biju's rampage. Hiruzen could feel the World Ender's steaming breath flow down his back. It made the hair on his neck stand. In the distance, he finally saw Shikaku and Choza who up, perched inside a tree. Hiruzen drew the beast closer and closer, until he was just meters from the Nara. He ground his teeth together. Here goes, he thought as he abruptly blitzed to the fox dug its hands into the earth and skidded to a halt. Hiruzen stopped in his tracks in time to watch the towering monster draw its arm back, preparing to rip shreds. Just as it began to swing its mighty hand down, it abruptly froze in place. Shadow possession complete, Shikaku yelled with strain. The beast snarled with its fangs bared. Its body inched back and forth, fighting against the constricting hold of the Nara's shadow. You two have to make this count. Can't hold this thing forever, Shikaku warned, desperately battling the Nine-Tails' strength. Choza sped through hand signs. Partial expansion jutsu. Both of his hands rapidly expanded into the size of boulders. Hiruzen and Choza leapt into the air. Choza interlocked his gigantic hands together and threw them well above him. Hiruzen flung his staff over his head. Now En declared. He quickly snapped the staff forward while it rapidly increased in size. The fox roared defiantly. A sudden brain-rattling ring could be heard. The trio of ninja were overcome with horror at the sight of the Nine-Tails amassing an unfatho of chakra at its mouth. Before either attack even connected, the demon fox had managed to form a pure black sphere of solid chakra. A Baijidama? Hiruzen thought in shock. The sheer amount of heat that radiated from the attack caused all three shinobi to squint and turn their heads. It's going this entire part of the village to take us out. Hiruzen had already put everything he had into this attack. No matter what happened now, that coal-black ball of destruction was going to be set off and there was them could do about it. We'll just have to take you with us, Hiruzen concluded with resolve, following through with his final attack. Crack! The adamantine staff combined with the Akimichi's fists connected with the skull of the Nine-Tails. Hiruzen could definitely point out the distinct cracking noise of Bofox's body met the dirt. However, something was off. Where the hell did the Baijidama go? Hiruzen wondered desperately as his feet touched the surface. A flash of light illuminated the entire forest like the sun was about to set. Hiruzen flung his attention to the light source. A fireball towered over the mountains from kilometers away. He watched in awe as the ground began to violently tremble beneath his feet. Boom! The deafening explosion rattled in his eardrums. How? Hiruzen was bewildered as to how the tailed beast bomb fired in that direction. He quickly scanned the AR. It was then that he saw it. Standing right before the half-open mouth of the Ninetales was the fourth Hokage, sporting his iconic cloak. Minato! Hiruzen could only see the right side of the determined gaze. Minato laid his left hand on the Biju before forming one sign with his right hand. Hiruzen watched the fourth and the Kyuubi disappear from the BA instant without so much as a trace. Hiruzen! The shockwave! Choza yelled. He was dragged back into reality and began to race through a number of signs. Earth-style earth wall. A large, firm layer of sediment erupted from the ground a feet, forming a barrier that Shikaku and Choza darted behind. No sooner than the wall materialized did a booming blast of superheated air tear through the forest around them. Trees uprooted and debris flew chaotically. The buried stones into the sides of mountains. Hiruzen grit his teeth at the sound of rocks bursting against his defense. Shikaku fell onto his rear when a branch was lodged the wall, nearly piercing his throat. All the trio could manage was to hunker down for the moment. Seconds passed, but eventually the vicious winds subsided, leaving the once chaotic clearing in an unsettling silence. What the hell just happened? Shikaku asked in bewilderment. Minato saved us, was all Hiruzen could think to say. It was only now that he realized his heart had been beating out of his chest the entire time. A wave of gratitude to him, but it had a hard time convincing him to forget that he was only a few milliseconds from certain death. He heaved a labored sigh. So what do we do now? Choza inquired. We should find and support Minato as soon as possible, Shikaku stated sternly. We have to help him put that beast away again. Hiruzen nodded. Shikaku is right. How are we going to even find where he went? Choza asked with a perplexed expression. Hiruzen did not give a verbal reply. He planted his trusty staff firmly on the ground, held it to his body, and stood against it with both legs. Take me up, King Enma, Hiruzen commanded his staff. The pole flew into the sky at a slight angle with Hiruzen in tow. He clung to it with little effort as it rapidly increased from the base of the ground to the clouds. Now kilometers high, Hiruzen had the chance to scan the area for Minato's whereabouts. From up so high, Hiruzen could marvel at the spectacle of his village and see over the hills and mountains into the tucked-away valleys. Minato wouldn't teleport so far away that we couldn't provide support, Hiruzen rationalized. He squinted his eyes to gain focus while he scanned the lush forests below. Finally, he spotted it. The whipping and lashing flurry of ginger tails that towered meter trees. There you are, Fox. Minato can't be far away, he thought. Take me back down, Hiruzen mouthed with haste. In only a moment, Hiruzen was once again touching the ground. Both the Nara and Akimichi looked at him. EXP. The Ninetales is directly east from here. About 10 kilometers away, he informed. Shikaku and Choza seemed to release all their pent-up tension with one relaxing sigh. Great, let's go. We don't have time to waste, Shikaku claimed. Let's use your body flicker to get there, Choza suggested to Hiruzen. Hiruzen approached both of them, placing one hand on Choza's shoulder, and he felt Shikaku put his own hand on his opposite shoulder. Here we come, Minato, Hiruzen thought assuredly before turning east and forming a single hand seal. His chakra flooded into his legs tenketsu like rushing water-crafted canals before he burst forth with greatly enhanced speed. The parting winds beat against his person with intensity and the leaves struggled to follow in only a moment. It was over and the scenery had morphed from the shambles of a half-destroyed forest to the serene, lush greenery that surrounded the outskirt. The calm wind and tranquil atmosphere that surrounded Hiruzen was a very welcome change. Hiruzen, Shikaku muttered into the silence with a quaint whisper. Hiruzen turned to his left where Shikaku and Choza stood, looking on at something. He calmly made his way to the duo. Something about the way they were acting threw Hiruzen off. It all felt so eerie. He stood between the Akimichi and the Nara genius, regarding their faces. They were both totally consumed by whatever they saw. Choza's face was masked with he couldn't even conceive what he had laid eyes on. Shikaku's expression was adorned with worry. His teeth ground together in indignation as sweat rolled down high. A sudden chill crept down Hiruzen's back. An abrupt and smothering weight of anxiety ravaged his old nerves. He scanned the scene to find what wrought these TW with such overwhelming distress. His wrinkled face sped through a look of concern to eye-bulging shock and settled on utter devastation. "Minato," Hiruzen muttered. No less than 15 meters away was the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, accompanied by his dear wife, Kushina Uzumaki. Both of them had been impaled through abdomen by one of the Nine-Tails' razor-sharp claws. "Oh no!" Hiruzen's voice was riddled with dread. Minato slowly turned his head to Hiruzen and offered a weak smile. "We just moved without thinking," he explained before tilting his head to the right for context. Hiruzen's eyes dashed to the right. Just out of the fox's reach was a small altar bathed in warm candlelight. Inside the altar, however, was a truly astounding sight: newborn baby. I appeared wholly unscathed, not a single blonde hair disturbed on its tiny head. Minato and Kushina never allowed the child to fall into the mercy of Minato. Hacked up crimson blood into his own hands, poured out between his fingers and ran down his wrists. His blue eyes were half-lidded. "Meet Naruto," Minato said with a bloody but genuine smile. Hiruzen hardly noticed Kushina slowly running through hand seals. "Hidden jutsu, adamantine sealing chains," she managed to weakly utter. A flurry of chakra chains shot out from the Uzumaki's upper back. Each chain soared toward the Kyuubi, wrapping around each limb and tail, constricting its mighty as Hiruzen stepped forward to approach the duo. "No," Minato blurted out. "Keep your distance. We have this under control now." Hiruzen scowled at his successor. He knew that Minato would not refuse assistance if he could not deal with the issue himself. "All right, I'll trust your judgment. Here, compliance. Please begin the seal, Kushina," Minato instructed his wife with a soft tone of voice. "I'll get the Nine-Tails." Kushina's body fought off tremors as she dabbled the tips of her fingers in the crimson blood that gathered on the Kyuubi's white claw and began to draw intricate SY infant son's abdomen. Her concentration never wavered even as her blood poured out of her body and pooled on the ground. "It's finished," she whispered while she made the last stroke. "All right," Minato sighed. "Here I go." To Hiruzen's right, Shikaku stepped forward in protest. "Don't tell me you're going to seal the Nine-Tails into your infant son?" Dejection was tearing the Nara apart. "It's the only way to contain the Biju," Minato retorted bluntly. "Naruto's the only one here with enough chakra to contain it," Kushina added weakly. Shikaku bawled. His fists. "He's just a baby." They kinda have a point, Shikaku," Choza defended, which got a disgusting look from his friend. Minato gazed upon Shikaku with his dreary blue eyes. "The Nine-Tails can't escape," he retorted with finality. The Hokage collected himself and took a deep breath. He adopted a determined aura before his hands sprung into action, sign after sign going by in a flash. "Those seals." Hiruzen's eyes grew wide with shock. "Minato, don't tell me you're doing what I think you're doing," he said in disbelief. The fourth didn't respond, focusing all of his attention into his jutsu until he finally made the necessary hand signs. "Reaper Death Seal," he exclaimed while he slammed his hands together. Minato grunted in horrible pain. Hiruzen watched the Hokage's very soul be torn from his body and remain pinned in the sky like it was crucified. His spirit's only ko was hanging blue tethers. Just behind the fiery blue construct appeared a mystical, smoky white cloud. The gaseous cloud swiftly began to transform. It expanded until it towered over the H. It took the form of a ghostly, tattered cloak that danced in the wind. From the sleeves emerged two decrepit, purple hands with abnormally long fingers and similar fingernails. The left hand grasped a set of prayer beads. From the V-shaped collar, the head of the creature took shape. It sported a lion's mane of white hair. A glowing yellow eyes were sunken in its skull. Its serrated teeth were clenched shut around an intricately crafted wakizashi. "The Reaper," Choza marveled. His hot breath became misty in the now chilling air. Hiruzen grit his teeth in frustration. "Don't you know this jutsu will kill you?" he reminded the Hokage with yells, as if he'd lost his mind and forgotten the requirem-feared Uzumaki technique. "Reaper, fetch me the Kyuubi's soul," he commanded the spirit. Hiruzen's attention latched onto the looming Reaper, its menacing figure levitating above everyone while it sauntered over to the writhing fox. The Nine-Tails tried to fight against the adamantine constraints, but couldn't make any ground. The Reaper was inching closer, unfazed by the demon's snarls. Hiruzen took note of the fiery eyes of the fox and all the blood-red hatred that emanated from its gaze. Its sharp, blood-covered fangs bared for all to fear. he knew could approach this Biju, even while it was restricted, without a concrete resolve. The Shinigami was no human. It made its way to the cornered fox as if it couldn't even understand threats or fear. The death god stopped before the fox, its low G effect. Hiruzen saw the Reaper's ghostly purple hand reach for the wakizashi between its yellow teeth. It licked the sharp blade with its long, narrow, black tongue before the fox. Without hesitation, the Shinigami plunged the wakizashi deep into the Ninetales' jugular. The fight between the demon and the chains halted, and then the Reaper wakizashi through the rest of the Kyuubi's throat. The Ninetales' eyes rolled into the back of their sockets as it choked on its own blood. All it could manage to do was lie motionless on the ground, gargling a mix of crimson. The Shinigami focused its supernatural power into a one-handed sign. From within the fatal gash in its neck, a fiery red mass that crackled like fire began to seep beast's neck at the Reaper's command. The Ninetales' soul, Hiruzen inwardly remarked, full of so much anger. Searing heat was flung from the demon's amassing soul and battled with the chilling aura of the death god. In moments, the entire Biju's life force took the shape body. The sheer power of it beat against the trees and made the wind roar uncontrollably. With the fox's spirit separated from its person, its body gave out under the chains before rapidly decaying into dust. The Ninetales was dead. Minato and Kushina face forward onto the ground because they could not stand anymore. The Shinigami swiftly whispered mystical chants over the prayer beads that clung to its left hand. When it concluded its murmured prayers, the ghastly figure held beads before the Biju's soul. Between the hollowed bores of the beads, the breeze eerily whistled until something changed. Abruptly, the soul of the demon was being hastily consumed by the bee. If the Reaper's venerated tool was some sort of soul catcher, they acted like a vacuum to the beast's life force, sucking it away to be contained inside. Hiruzen gasped in bewilderment. He couldn't believe how quickly such a strong spirit was being devoured. The Ninetales' soul is gone, Shikaku shakily blurted out. When all was said and done, the Reaper leisurely turned around, beads in tow, and made its way back behind Minato's spirit. Now that we have the Biju's spirit, its body will have no choice but to reform within Naruto, thereby securing the Kyuubi's full power within him. Minato explained as Minato wiped the blood from his chin and wearily began a series of hand seals. What are you doing now? Hiruzen's eyebrow twitched frantically as he beckoned the Hokage. The next step, Minato replied as he finished his next jutsu. Summoning jutsu. He laid his right hand on the surface and a wispy plume of smoke erupted into the air next to him. A knee-high toad hopped out of the white column. Its back was sea and its front was a warm orange pigment. Most peculiar of all was the toad's midsection, which was wrapped in a layer of white bandages. Minato? The toad beckoned with its high-pitched voice. Ma and Pa just informed us of what's going on in the leaf. Is Master Jiraiya okay? The amphibian asked, betraying its concern. What's wrong with Jiraiya? Hiruzen instantly wondered. Minato apparently did his best to smile. Not the time, Giratora, he said while throwing his thumb over his shoulder to point out the giant hole in his back. Giratora gasped. Great sage, what do you need me to do? The toad waited intently for instruction. Minato choked out another bloody cough. We need to use your scroll, the fourth said. Giratora immediately tore the bandages from his abdomen, exposing a lightly tanned cylinder where his guts should be. He then stood on his hind legs and focused with a hand sign. Release, Giratora commanded, and suddenly his upper body shot up from his legs an entire meter. His midsection was one long scroll that he unfurled for use. Kushina held her hand up and extended her pointer finger, which radiated with the blue flame of her chakra. She began burning something into the paper of the SCR. Careful, long strokes. This is the key to Naruto's 8-trigram seal, which will restrain the Kyuubi, the redhead explained as she made the final stroke in the scroll. Make sure that this scroll gets to Master Jiraiya and that he knows what it's for, Minato instructed the toad. It will be done, Giratora nodded before disappearing in a dancing cloud of white smoke. Kushina coughed into her hand. She looked terribly distressed and the sweat and grime that dotted her face didn't help. Please, get Naruto for us? She softly instructed. Hiruzen dashed to the altar and carefully cradled the sleeping Naruto in his arms. He had only just gotten to take notice of the baby's defining whiskers, of which stitch on each cheek. His eyes are even bluer than Minato's, he realized. Shikaku and Choza had gone through the courtesy of laying the impaled couple on their sides, facing each other. Hiruzen laid the infant boy in Kushina's arms, who cheeked tenderly. Hiruzen, Minato called his attention.
Yeah, son?
Hiruzen responded softly. Minato's dim, blue eyes settled on him. I have one final request, the blonde revealed. I want you to make sure that Master Jiraiya raises Naruto, he stated firmly. And I want you to tell him I'm sorry for dumping a huge task on him with such short forth instructed half-jokingly. Hiruzen resolved himself. I'll see to it that it's fulfilled. He assured his dying successor with a stern nod. A calm but melancholic stillness consumed the area. Let's infuse what remains of our chakra into the seal, so that one day he will be able to meet us, Kushina offered to her husband. Never taking her eyes off of Minato just laughed weakly while he stared longingly at his son. That's a great idea. His fingertip was engulfed with a new, warm, blue flame of chakra. It danced in the wind until he placed his finger on the seal of blood over the boy's stomach. T left, he quietly noted while he eloquently traced each line of the seal with his finger. Kushina swiftly followed after Minato had finished. Now the seal will be reinforced with both of our chakras, she murmured in whispers. I guess this means it's time for goodbyes, Minato said somberly. Hiruzen's stomach folded over itself when he heard Kushina sniffle, before she wiped away the tears clouding her eyes and sighed weakly. Hiruzen couldn't help but needed to be this way. I'm sorry that our time is being cut short, she spoke softly into her child's ear. I know it's unfair that we won't be there to watch you grow. Her voice started to continue on. It's going to be difficult to contain the Kyuubi. People are going to treat you differently, and much will be expected of you. The Uzumaki held the infant closer and tighter to her with all the remaining strength she had. There's going to be a lot of hardship ahead that we won't be there to, and times will come where everything will feel hopeless. She clenched her eyes shut to pinch off the tears that kept building up. They streamed down her chin and stained her cheeks. But regardless of all of that, just Kain father and I will always be with you in your heart. Kushina touched her forehead to her son's and ruffled his short, blonde hair. There's no doubt in our mind that you'll make a wonderful shinobi that will become big strong enough to always keep moving forward, no matter what's in your way. Hiruzen hated watching Kushina pour her heart out to her son, but he couldn't bring himself to look away. Her pain and sorrow was not lost on him. And know that we couldn't raise you, we're certain that Master Jiraiya will turn you into a fine man, she asserted through gritted teeth. Kushina winced in distress but never took her eyes off Naruto. I just want you to know that we love you more than anything in the whole world, she concluded to cracks in her voice and began to sob. Minato smiled warmly, realizing that it was his turn to pass on his final words. He wrapped his arm around Kushina and rested his hand on Naruto's stomach. I don't really have much to say that your mother didn't already tell you, heh. I just wish I could have done more as your father, he said as a single tear ran down his. Used a moment to silently compose himself. Be strong, Naruto. I know that you'll do better than we did, he concluded with a bittersweet smile. Hiruzen could tell the light in Minato's eyes was fading away. Minato got one more longing look at his wife. Are you ready? Minato softly asked Kushina. She nodded her head in confirmation. Minato raised his left hand into the air, signaling the death god. Give the boy its soul, the Hokage commanded the ever-looming Reaper. The Shinigami removed O from the band of the venerated item and held it over Naruto's gut. Then it held its other hand before its face and made a single hand sign. At once, the small bead exploded with the burning red mass of the Kyuubi's soul. It streamed into Naruto's body sporadically. The boy instantly began to wail and cry, couldn't help but wince watching all of the fox's hateful life force flood Naruto's person. The soul ceased pouring from the prayer bead. A hiss could be heard over the child's screams as the soul of the Ninetales was wholly forced in the seal of Kushina, a blood. Minato formed a final hand sign. The Reaper sliced open its own stomach with its wakizashi because it understood what came next. Sell, Minato demanded with finality. The red configuration on Naruto's abdomen constricted and changed into a tight swirl that was surrounded by complex SYMB patterns. At the same time, the Reaper used its wakizashi to sever the tethers of Minato's soul from his body and seal his spirit within the dark innards of the Shinigami's STO. The deafening sound of Naruto's screams were overshadowed by Minato and Kushina's silence. Hiruzen somberly knelt down closer to the family. They died while holding Naruto tightly in their grasp. Kushina still didn't take her eyes off Naruto even when Shippi took it upon himself to carefully close their eyelids. Hiruzen shared melancholic glances with Choza and Shikaku. Even he could tell that they all knew the same thing. Naruto didn't choose this life and it wasn't going him either. All Naruto could hear were screams of terror. He opened his heavy eyes, but all he could see was red. His tongue was coated with the taste of iron. A sudden crash rattled his brain in his skull, and he was consumed by the chilling darkness. Where was he? What was happening to him? Minato, you know that we can't seal the fox into him. A feminine voice argued in defiance. There has to be another way, she demanded. There isn't another way, a man softly retorted. Now that the Ninetales has been removed, you're going to die, and he's the only person in the village with a Stro Chakra network to contain the Kyuubi. He finished, barely mouthing the words through the shakes in his voice. Naruto tried to focus his eyes on the arguing duo, but his vision was too hazy to make out who they were. At least this way he will be regarded as a hero for helping us to defeat the beast, the man reasoned. Our son will be instrumental in saving the village. The village! Naruto heard those words and recoiled. He ground his teeth together. A searing hot rage rapidly consumed him. His eyes shot open, directing their piercing anger a blonde man in a white cloak and a red-headed woman wrought with fatigue. They stood over an altar with a newborn resting on top of it. He's our only hope, Kushina, the man concluded, his tone not betraying the sadness on his face. The woman turned away from her husband. She closed her eyes and looked down in defeat, beginning to sob into her hands. The blonde placed his arm around her head against his chest. She began to cry uncontrollably into his flak vest. Naruto had no clue about who these people were, but his blood boiled underneath his skin. It didn't matter that he didn't know why he hated them. What mattered needed to kill them. I know you're right, she whimpered. She wiped her eyes and calmed her nerves. How do you want to get rid of the fox? She said through barely held together. We'll use the 8 trigrams. Then I will wrestle the Kyuubi's chakra into the seal. These people are trying to get rid of me, was all that Naruto understood. Just like the other villagers. He didn't know why, but he felt so slow, so encumbered. If he didn't act now, he believed he was going to die. These two strangers barely acknowledged him. They were too focused on the baby that laid on the altar. He could hear their whispers, but they didn't concern him, they threatened his existence. So Naruto needed to defend himself. He summoned all of his strength and managed to draw his arm back over his head to attack. If this kid is the only thing that can take me out, I'll just get rid of him, he thought as he swiped down at the baby with all the speed he could muster. Kushina, the blonde man blurted out. The cloaked man dashed in front of the assault, followed by the red-headed woman. The attack was mere feet away from the baby, but it was unsuccessful. Stopped of the duo. Naruto saw the rosy red blood gush from their wounds and was frozen stiff. He had failed to ensure his existence. He grit his teeth in anguish. Why? He thought. Why do the villagers want me gone? Minato, a new, aged voice muttered. Naruto averted his attention to the newcomer. It was a familiar face, the third Hokage. What was he doing here? Minato, what are you doing? The old man protested through clenched teeth. Naruto quietly observed the interaction while the blonde and the redhead bled out from his attack. He's the only person who can contain the fox, Minato retorted with a stern expression. He's just a baby, Hiruzen spat back. It doesn't matter, Minato replied. Naruto doesn't have a say in it. He must become the new host of the Ninetales. Naruto's ears perked up. He replayed Minato's words in his mind. The child shares his name. It didn't sit right with the blonde. No one in Konoha would ever burden the same name as him. Naruto couldn't put it together, but something about all of this made him feel uneasy. The whole situation flashed through his mind. None of it made sense, and yet, his hatred for these people felt genuine. His breath hollowed and his heart started to race. All the hair on his body stiffened. He was on the verge of a grand realization. It was right in front of him. He cooed his hand and his fingertips would just grace the very surface of the truth. But it was just beyond his grasp. Browse just in community forum beta story anime/manga/anime/Naruto/anime/Naruto/plus. The boy's eyes flew wide open as he shot up into a sitting position. He could feel his heart beating out of his chest. He panted hastily, unable to control his breathing rolled down his forehead and into his eyes. He wiped the sweat away with his forearm. The yellow-headed youth balled his fists and closed his eyes shut to regain composure. His bearings flooded back to him after the quiet started to set in. That nightmare again, he thought indignantly. Naruto turned to look at the clock on top of his nightstand. He lazily pushed the empty cups of ramen stacked into a tower out of the way of the clock. It read 7 morning. At least I got a couple hours of sleep this time, Naruto acknowledged, trying to see the bright side. He threw his blanket off of him and sluggishly stepped down from his bed. His body was heavy with fatigue. He scratched the backside of his neck and sighed. "You are ready." He sauntered through the trash-laden floor and into his bathroom and brushed his teeth. He glanced at the shower with consideration before dismissing it. Naruto see to shower this morning, plus he had showered 3 days ago anyway. Finished with the toiletries, he made his way to a pile of clothes that were half sprawled out on the floor. Rummaging through the pile, he selected a simple black TOF orange cargo pants to wear. The blonde was ready to get something to eat and made his way to the small kitchen at the end of his apartment. The dishes were haphazardly stacked onto one sink. He skipped the refrigerator because his apartment had no electricity again the whole month and any food inside had long gone bad. The pantry was his only be open before him and gave its contents a once-over. Empty. He was going to the academy hungry today. On the nightstand next to his bed, he reached for his frog wallet. He opened it and wondered how much money he had left. 5 Rio. Maybe he can heckle old man another half bowl of ramen. Anything to avoid scrounging through the trash for scraps again. He stuffed the wallet deep into his cargo pants. Also on the nightstand was a rustic switchblade. It was horribly worn around the handle and holding it brought discomfort. He flicked the knife open to examine it. Morning sun slid down the metal with a flashing light. The blade had a few nicks in it here and there. In a weird way, the weapon managed to be charming. It was difference between getting mugged and keeping your belongings, and it wasn't so bad considering Naruto found it in the trash. He placed the weapon neatly into high. Naruto snatched his apartment keys from the nightstand. They twirled around his finger, ringing out as they clanged into each other. He made his way to the apartment and tried his hardest to part the curtains the slightest amount to see what, or rather, who could be outside his apartment that he didn't want to run into. Using just his one blue eye, the boy could make out a few thugs waiting in the shadows of the alleyways below to prey on the next passerby. "I should probably avoid the street," he mumbled under his breath. He paired his keys with his wallet and turned to the window next to his bed. Beyond it were the alleyways, which were perfect for avoiding confrontation. Unlocking it, he gently lifted the window open to avoid as much of the squeaking in the frame as possible. He threaded one leg outside and then the next, before falling through and landing on his feet with a splash below. The window fell closed with a thud. Looking to his left and right, he made sure no one was around to spot him. The sun's light fought against the apartment complex, which shielded the alleyway with make haste in. Naruto trudged through the puddles, keen on every noise he made. He was careful not to bring attention to himself, at least not until he got to the academy. Unfortunately, the blanket of stealth that he enjoyed in the alleyways of the slums was fleeting. No matter what route he took, he'd end up in the urban sprawl of TH eventually. He lowered his gaze to the dirt and cobblestone path. Looking up brought risk, something he'd learned many times over. Villagers tended to ignore those who didn't contact. Your average friendly banter was swiftly reduced to whispers when the people saw him out. He couldn't hear the words they mumbled to each other behind his back what they were saying anyway. They were warning their fellow villagers that the demon was out again and they needed to be on guard. It didn't bother him anymore though. Not like it used to, and learned to just keep moving despite how much it tore him up inside. Every time Naruto brushed past another stranger, his heart would jump in his chest. He had to fight the oxygen down his throat to keep from hyperventilating and fro, but he had become accustomed to hiding that anxiety deep within. Any behavior that made him anything more than invisible was always misconstrued to be a nefarious act of a demon. When you panicked and flipped out, you got B or both. But luck was with him today, and how grateful he was for it. He made his trek to the academy without any interaction with anyone. A sigh of relief escaped, stepped over the threshold that marked the academy grounds. However, he was taken aback by an unsightly crowd of people forming around one point in the middle of the academy training field in a neat fashion. He approached. At a closer glance, Naruto saw that the crowd was ordered by grade from 2nd to 5th year academy students. He poked and prodded his way through to his group, the 4th years, trying his hardest not to make his presence known. He unwittingly bumped into a fellow me class who immediately shoved him onto the ground in disdain. "Don't touch me, punk," Kiba threatened through his bared fangs. Naruto frowned and gritted his teeth bitterly. He wanted to snap back at the Inuzuka but knew better and bit his tongue. The youth picked himself up before dusting Kiba. A voice sliced through the surrounding chatter of the crowd. Naruto looked for its source and saw it was his new sensei named Iruka with his arms crossed, plastered onto his face. "Act your age and don't cause trouble," he instructed. "Humph." The Inuzuka scoffed with a resentful aura. "Naruto," Iruka's voice boomed in his ears. "Take your spot over there." He pointed out a free spot between two other classmates, Hinata Hyuga and Sasuke Uchi. He shoved his hands into his pockets, kept his head down, and made his way to his spot in the crowd. He walked into the space between the Hyuga and the Uchiha were quiet. The Hyuga appeared nervous, like she was shrinking under someone's stare. She always twiddled her thumbs and tapped her index fingers together over and over. Much of an opinion of her. Besides, she never treated him wrongly. The Uchiha held a more aloof air about him. He stuck to himself and was good at it. Naruto could relate in a way. They were opposites otherwise though. Sasuke AC won every spar, knew every answer. He was respected by his peers and seemed like he was treated well. Naruto couldn't help but be envious of him. Those were luxuries that Naruto simply didn't have. But something about the Uchiha infuriated Naruto. It wasn't that he everything Naruto wanted. It was that the Uchiha didn't seem to be grateful for any of it in the slightest. He made friends with no one and was indifferent to everything. He acknowledged none around him no matter what they did. He possessed all of this amazing talent, tried to share his secrets. He was just an all-around uptight, selfish, arrogant bastard. What was even more infuriating to Naruto was the fellow classmates who fell before his feet and ogled him constantly. They vie for his attention like a circus of clown, understanding that he wants absolutely nothing to do with them. It was pathetic to watch. But because of Sasuke's inherent greatness and all the positive attention it accrued, Naruto knew one thing for certain. He just had to prove that he was better than wanted to enjoy all of his privileges. Naruto tried to one-up the Uchiha the last couple of years any way he could. He can't outscore him on written tests because he still hasn't been taught to didn't necessarily hinder him. He knew that the best way to win people over was with direct competition. So, Naruto always tried to fight the Uchiha during taijutsu shinobi spars. Naruto always lost. Brutally. He was never taught any of the traditional taijutsu katas that were taught to all the other students. The teachers just never paid him a little taijutsu techniques he did know were self-taught or his best copy of what techniques he watched others do. He didn't need anyone to tell him that he was very though. He knew he was terrible because he had never landed a single blow on Sasuke during any of their countless spars. Naruto never ceased trying to win. Using new tricks, new moves, new strategies. It didn't matter. He could never close the distance between himself and the Sasuke probably didn't see it like him. But to Naruto, they were rivals. He scanned the rest of the training grounds. All the first-year and sixth-year academy students stood at attention, facing the rest of the attendees. In front of them, students closely with an air of admiration was the robed old man himself. "This is a very important day for all of you," Hiruzen said to the new and senior students as he paced before them. "Today you start your final year at the Konoha Academy before you will begin your lives as freshly minted genin," he said to the seniors. "And you all are just embarking on the path of the ninja." The many beginning youths stared at their leader in awe. Naruto had again failed to remember that at the start of each year, the Hokage likes to come to inspire the new senior students and give the fresh blood a warm way academy. "I remember when I started in the academy the first year of its creation when Lord Tobirama had just established the ranking system," he smirked. "And I remember when I graduated at age 12 and became a full-fledged genin under the second as well." He reached into his white robe and held out his hand, i.e. the headband. He held it high for everyone to see. The metal protector had gashes and cuts scattered about it, and the black cloth that held it together was all but tattered with tea. Not quite in the shape it used to be after all the battles it saw, but this headband is still older than all of your parents, he jokingly revealed. Every student, barring Sasuke, oot and ought at the ancient relic. "Each of us understood that we were integral to the future of our home," Hiruzen said. "We were the next generation of defenders against all of the Land of Fire's essential that we all knew that, and that we became capable ninja because of that." His wooden cane tapped against the ground as he circled back around to continue his spiel. "To protect your nation, your people, and your loved ones from those who seek to destroy them is one of the most noble goals that exist. There is evil in this world at nothing to eradicate what is good. The shinobi world is dark and hellish and crashes down on you like the never-ending waves of the ocean. Not a single one of yo the rank of Chunin without being washed in it," the veteran said with a full amount of assuredness in his voice. "But don't let that hinder you. As a shinobi, you will be equipped with all of the tools to battle the darkness and protect the warm, graceful flames of the fire that Ku and our people alive. A shinobi knows how to endure and will stop at nothing to do what is necessary to achieve their goal. His confidence irradiated from him and in every child in the vicinity. You will create bonds with your peers that no other career could ever replicate. A trust that only unforgiving conditions and hardship could mold. Naruto perked up particular. You will learn discipline that is second to none, and will have access to all the resources and specialized training programs of the greatest armed force in the Shinop touted. The Konoha Ninja Academy is the most prestigious in the Land of Fire. Being accepted into it is an honor, and graduating from it is a great achievement. The third matter-of-fact tone. The staff of this establishment, your teachers, were handpicked by me and my advisors because we were confident in their ability to bring out the best in you. You understand and prepare you for the life of the ninja, the aged man said with a stern edge. Yeah, right? Naruto bitterly remarked. He couldn't help but roll his eyes and scoff at Hiruzen's words. I've hardly been taught a thing by these hand-picked idiots. Each of your journeys down this road will mold you into some of the finest shinobi our country has ever seen, and I admire every one of you for taking it upon you to become the defenders and leaders of our country. The old man then concluded with a respectful bow toward the kids. Nearly all students, new and old, broke out into a miasma of whispered tones, wows, and admiration. Naruto was also a victim of the third's inspiring speech. His face was lit up with excitement, thinking of the day that he'd be able to say he was a ninja. His smile st ear and his blue eyes were wide with wonder. What are you smiling for, brat? A fresh voice sounded over the whispers of the crowds. Naruto whirled to his right at the sound of the voice. 3 boys at the end of the 5th-year group were glaring at him with scornful, disgusted faces. Surely you don't think Lord Hiruzen was saying any of that to you? One of the boys spat. The area went silent save for the wind's cutting breeze through the trees. Naruto clenched his teeth in his mouth and frowned at them with anger in his stare. You're never going to become a ninja. You're as smart as a sack of rocks and everyone hates you, the last boy exclaimed. Naruto's stomach folded on itself hearing the snickers and hushed laughs of his peers. Red flushed his cheeks from embarrassment. Haha, good one, Goji. One of the boys commended the other. Cut it out, you 3, or you're gonna be punished, Iruka warned. Don't defend this trash, Iruka-sensei. The boy to Goji's right, who started the ordeal, declared with a hint of disgust. Mako, Iruka blurted but was interrupted. I'm not trash, Naruto protested firmly, and I'm gonna become an even greater ninja than all 3 of you clowns combined, he declared assuredly. He ignored Iruka's disappointed expression. Can you even spell ninja yet? The boy right of Mako asked rhetorically. Multiple kids burst into a flurry of laughs at the boy's insult. A dead last like you isn't going the academy, much less becoming a shinobi, he spat back. Kira, Iruka shouted with a scathing tone. Naruto's face was searing hot. I don't need to spell anything to kick your asses, Naruto proclaimed with broad shoulders. Ooze of surprise erupted from the crowds at his bold words, and he had to dismiss a few snickers that sounded around him. Is that a threat, punk? Mako asked through gritted teeth as he and his 2 friends stepped out of their group and next to Naruto's. Find out, Naruto sternly retorted. Why, you little? Each of the boys sprinted through the crowd to Naruto. The classmates nearest to Naruto retreated from the scene. Goji drew his fist back for a devastating strike. Naruto positioned himself to slip the punch and started to pull his fist back. Before he could punch Goji in the face, something had changed. In an instant, the Hokage had stepped between Naruto and the rushing boys, stopping them in their tracks. Naruto's fuming anger starved under the scornful gaze of the old man who eyed him and his adversaries from just under the brim of his Hokage cap. You 4 are coming with me to have a talk, Hiruzen stated through a stern expression. That's all from me, you can handle them from here, he said to the Instru students and walked off with the troubled youths in tow. The 4 boys were separated into their opposing sides down the middle by the irritated, robed man who quickly marched them through the academy doors and in classroom. All of you take a seat, he instructed them with fire in his throat. Naruto took his seat on the first row of desks, and the older boys did similarly with a seat set apart between them. Naruto couldn't quite tell, but he swore that Hiruzen eyed each of them with a tinge of thoughtfulness and sorrow. The aged man focused his scornful attention on Mako, who had spoken out to belittle Naruto first. Tell me, Mako, what about Naruto was so important to you that you felt the need to speak out during a celebration of your fellow students? The old Kage asked. Mako's face was flushed with surprise at being put on the spot. The fact that he was being called out by one of the greatest shinobi to ever live probably didn't help either. Well, Mako mumbled. You felt like tearing down a fellow student who you saw as lesser than you. Hiruzen answered matter-of-factly. Naruto watched with glee at Mako's dumbfounded face filled with red-hot embarrassment. And that goes for you both as well. He called out to Goji and Kira, who shuddered beneath his berating look. All three of you were so caught up in your own selfishness that you had to belittle another person and simultaneously sour an important event for your fellow studman laid out the truth before the trio. Much to Naruto's pleasure. Naruto grinned triumphantly. Hehe, yeah, that's right. Eat that, you clowns. He laughed at his bullies who looked at him with indignation. Hiruzen sighed. And then there's you, Naruto, he continued. Huh? Naruto gasped in bewilderment. You may not have started the altercation, but you certainly had your fair end of the participation, Hiruzen pointed out to the youth. You egged them on to resort to a fight would have broken out if not for someone stepping in. Naruto's triumph was swiftly squashed under the boot of Hiruzen's criticisms. All of you are supposed to one another, befriend one another. You're up and coming ninja, and your comrades. The aged Kage rattled off to each boy. The four of them shared bitter looks. This insolence cannot be tolerated. Wait here, I'm going to notify your parents and then you're coming with me, Naruto. The Hokage revealed as he walked out of closed it behind him. Wait, what? Mako exclaimed. This stupid brat got us in trouble with the Hokage and now our parents are going to get involved. Kira scoffed in disdain. Naruto's expression soured. What's the problem? Your parents will probably understand anyway, he retorted. The adults were often more cruel to him than the Sitch. You would never understand. Goji spat bitterly. You don't even have any parents. His hot tongue quipped. Naruto's mouth seized. He wanted to retort, but Goji was right. He wouldn't understand their situation. If I didn't know that Lord Third would be coming back, I'd beat the hell out of you right here, Kira threatened through his teeth. Someone like you shouldn't be able to breathe the same air as us normal people anyway. Goji spat bitterly. The trio were silent, waiting for Naruto to say something back to them, but it never came. Naruto simply did not feel the need to respond to any of their threats. Watch your back, demon brat, Mako threatened with a sinister stare. A few silent moments passed and the door creaked open to reveal the Hokage, who was accompanied by a trio of women. Presumably the mothers of the boys. The irritated and disapproving looks with their children before gasping at the unsightly demon. Naruto shuddered under their gazes and gave his best attempt to avoid Hiruzen entered the room, closely followed by each mother. Here you are. He pointed to a collection of seats convenient for them to talk to their children. The SA chairs and things were now in motion. I apologize for summoning you ladies on such short notice, but I figured it would be appropriate for you to get the chance to discipline your sons accordingly. The much to the misfortune of the bullies. The whole discipline process was grueling. Naruto couldn't help but notice every dirty look he got from the women and every indignant stare that the other boys' eventually ended, and the bullies left one by one with their disgruntled mothers. So can I go now, or what? Naruto asked the Sandaime. Hiruzen scrutinized him from his chair for a moment. A thoughtful demeanor flowed from him, and he could tell the Hokage was in deep thought. You can't let them get to you, you know? The old man's words cut through the silence. Ha! You have to let their words roll off you or else you just prove them right. They shouldn't call me trash. Naruto shot back bitterly. You're right, Hiruzen agreed. But they are the ones that are being trashy by acting out like that, the Sarutobi noted. When you play their game, you act out just expect you to and give them a reason to be hostile to you. Everyone is hostile to me. It doesn't matter how I act. Naruto protested with balled fists. It does matter if you're just as guilty as they are, the man calmly pointed out to him. A sigh escaped his clenched teeth. Tell me about what's going on for you, the Sandaime requested. Moving on to a new subject, Naruto looked at his feet in contemplation. Nothing. I'm still trying to find you a personal trainer. It's been tough, but you won't be doing nothing for long, I promise, the old man assured him. Naruto didn't respond. He knew why not even the Hokage could coerce anyone to train him. Getting caught teaching the demon brat is social and career suicide. And gonna take him in and teach him, even if the Hokage asked them to do it. Are you still having that nightmare that keeps you up the last few months? Hiruzen curiously inquired after the long-winded silence. Naruto glanced at him. The memories of the nightmare flashed through his mind in an instant. Yeah, he said plainly, but now I can remember the entire dream. he revealed, which made the Sarutobi lean up in his chair. Tell me about it then, the Hokage instructed the whiskered boy. In the nightmare, I can hear people screaming. I can't really see them, but I feel angry and hateful. Naruto began, trying to retell the events of the nightmare in, I try, but I can't move. I'm too weak, too hurt, I don't really know. I hear two people talking, some lady and her boyfriend or something, he explained. Hear him carefully. I can't make out what they look like yet, but they are talking about me. Talking about sealing me away into their sun. Naruto reveals. He wasn't sure, but he thugged something in Hiruzen. A slight change in demeanor. They mentioned the village, and that enraged me to no end. I was able to focus on them. Some red-headed woman and a blonde guy. I don't know why, but in the MO pure hatred for them, he said. Naruto carefully noted how Hiruzen adjusted the grip on his cane. I don't want to be sealed away, so I try to kill their son, but they jump in the way and I hit them in the process. Stabbed them both clean through the stomach. Hie's names were Minato and Kushina. I remember that. He watched the Sandaime for any developments in response. Then you showed up, said it was a bad idea to seal me away into the kid. And the dream basically ended. Naruto looked down to his feet, but something about a wrong. In the end, the man, Minato, called his son Naruto. He shakily revealed. He faced the Hokage for some form of reassurance. The old man was silent for a moment. He appeared in deep thought about what Naruto had revealed to him. Naruto grew impatient. His nerves got the best of him, and he felt that he just needed to hear the Hokage say what he was withholding from him. What do you, thin man? Naruto beckoned with concern. Hiruzen sighed and pursed his lips. He met Naruto's gaze with his own tired. Your seal is loosening and the Nine-Tails chakra is leaking out of it. He explained, sleeping. Its evil chakra mixing in with your own is making you see its memories. The aged man explained matter-of-factly. Naruto gulped down a lump in his throat. Am I going to be all right? Oh yes, of course, child. The seal is meant to loosen over time to allow your two chakras to mix. Very soon, you'll be ready to start training to control the fox's Pao. Hokage tried to quell his worries. So, if I'm seeing the Kyuubi's memories, that means that the baby in the dream is actually me? Naruto felt his heart race again. This huge realization at the foremind was rearing its head once more. Cold bullets of sweat sped down his forehead. He was petrified by the puzzle he was putting together. The crow's feet under Hiruzen's eyes became more pronounced. He looked longingly at Naruto. I hadn't planned to tell you until you became older, when you'd be able to understand easier, Hiruzen explained somberly. Naruto could feel the air get thicker and more humid. The entire atmosphere of the room had changed with the direction of the conversation. The whiskered blonde F his arms stand up as a tense sense of panic set in. Understand what easier? Naruto inquired, though he was unsure if he even wanted to hear the answer to his question. This is an S-rank government secret, Naruto, so you can't let what I'm about to tell you get out to anyone else. The old man cryptically warned. Trust me, it's in interest that this stays a secret. Otherwise you could be in severe danger. You need to give me your word that you won't tell anyone. Naruto could feel the severity of the Hokage's words get heavier with every sentence. Why, you have my word, Naruto promised, barely sure of himself. Hiruzen closed his aged eyes and let out a labored breath. He looked into Naruto's blue eyes with sincerity and something else. Naruto focused his full attention on voice. The red-headed woman in your dream was named Kushina Uzumaki. The blonde man was named Minato Namikaze. The Hokage began. Naruto nodded along in UND the old man. They were both Konoha shinobi. Minato was the fourth Hokage. They were your mother and father, the Sandaime explained to him. Naruto froze in place. He felt a ringing in his ears grow louder and louder until he felt deafened. His heart began to beat vigorously into his own ribcage so badly it had to start throbbing. My parents, he thought with a hint of happiness at finally receiving a name for them. The moment of reprieve was narrow. Naruto's genuine smile was replaced with a dark realization. His face was lathered with unyielding hopelessness. They're dead. I'll never meet them, he somberly thought. The feeling of hopelessness weighed down on his heart and grew into a crushing ocean of sadness. He replayed the nightmare over and over in his mind. It was all he could think about to understand what they looked like, what they sounded like. He watched they wide with horror over and over again every single time the Nine-Tails tried to attack their child him. How loving they were, he thought, Feeling robbed of his pair, his face flashed with an awful look of terror. It hadn't occurred to him until then that he had been dreaming about slaughtering his beloved parents for months on the hatred he felt for them. All the times he cursed himself because he couldn't kill his mother, father, and himself. All of this was the influence of the Nine Tails? How so evil? He trembled under the disturbing malice that permeated within himself. But wait, he thought in realization. If the nightmare is accurate, then that means that they sealed the Nine Tails into me. The surface underneath Naruto fell through as if the entire planet just crumbled away and left him careening into the infinite blackness. A million different emotions him like tsunami waves. They swallowed him, beating against him relentlessly until he was drowning. He remained completely still, preserved in a layer of shock. My father was the fourth Hokage. He repeated over and over in his mind hundreds of times. He tried desperately to make sense of it. The hero of the leaf put the into his own child. That couldn't be. It doesn't add up. What sort of parent, especially a hero, would burden their newborn child with such a fate? He lied certainly to him, but the old man wouldn't do such a thing. Naruto knew that. Naruto knew that Hiruzen spoke honestly about this. There was no doubting that. His mind overloaded incoherent nonsense. He sucked air deep into his lungs, forgetting that he hadn't been breathing. He threw his hand up to his chest as he panted uncontrollably and sneezed. His head was being rushed full of only loosely logical thoughts. Each one was more impossible than the next. Breath escaped in ragged gasps, and bile rose in his stitch until several moments passed that he realized his cheeks were stained with tears. He collapsed onto the floor, clutching his chest with both hands. I'm supposed to be a hero for containing the QB inside, he thought. And yet, I am the most hated person in the village? The bitter disgust for the villagers and grew stronger within him. Did they not love me? Naruto pondered. Did they simply not care? They must have been evil. But he was the Hokage. What mother doesn't love her child? Naruto. The booming voice startled him back to the present and stilled the jumbled mess that was his mind. He looked up. Hiruzen was knelt down over him with a somber expression. Naruto hadn't realized that the Hokage had rested his hand over his shoulder. Whether to get his attention, Naruto didn't know. They did it because they had no other choice. Hiruzen quietly explained to Naruto, as if answering the thousands of questions that echoed inside Naruto's mind had helped them save Konoha, and they trusted you to control the beast's power, the third revealed. It will be difficult to understand right now. You're just 10 years old, hate them over it. Naruto was silent, staring at the aged Kage with his bulging blue eyes. If it were your son? Naruto mouthed out between sniffles. Would you do the same? Naruto needed to know. He needed to see if all Hokage were willing to do something so horrible to their own children or if it was just his father. The third didn't hesitate to give his answer. I wouldn't have done a single thing different from Minato or Kushina if I were in the same situation. He firmly stated expression. Naruto turned onto his back and stared at the ceiling in contemplation. I can't accept that, he thought. The Hokage are heroes. Why would they do something so accept it? Out of the hundreds of rampant thoughts in his head, one stood out. One kept repeating and rose to the tumultuous surface. And in the chaos, clarity came. Naruto decision. I'm going to become the Hokage, he said aloud. I'll prove that a great Hokage will never need to do something so horrible, he exclaimed to the third. Hiruzen just looked somberly at him, but it was too late for it all to be made right. Sometimes being the Hokage means being able to make the hard decisions, Nar man reasoned to him with dejection. Naruto peered into his tired eyes with a stern, determined expression that overshadowed the painful glare in his eyes. Then I'll create a world where no one will need to make those decisions ever again. Naruto sauntered down the street, his hands interlocked around his neck. He stared into the sky in deep thought. The sun was setting behind the Hokage monument. About his father's monument was different than he remembered, but Naruto saw them all a little differently now. It had been a few hours since his talk with Hiruzen. He was on his way home. He felt drained and empty. His body was heavy with fatigue and each step was laborious. Naruto peered into his tired eyes with a stern, determined expression that overshadowed the painful glare in his eyes. Then I'll create a world where no one will need to make those decisions ever again. He reached the ramen stand. Naruto, Tsuchi said. You've looked better. Is everything all right? The man asked with a hint of concern. Yeah, Naruto said stone-faced. I only have enough for half a bowl. So can I get some miso ramen? Naruto asked while he retrieved his frog wallet from his back, of course. Tsuchi assured him with a smile which Naruto was thankful for. It'll be done momentarily. Momentarily came and went, and Naruto was now finishing a savory bowl of miso ramen. He masterfully maneuvered his pair of chopsticks to get the final few strand noodles in the bowl. "Thank you so much for the meal, Mr. Ishiraku," Naruto babbled through a mouth full of noodles. "It's my pleasure, Naruto," he replied in kind. As Naruto gulped down the delicious broth of his ramen, he felt somewhat disappointed. Maybe it was foolish to think that ramen would magically make him feel better. Him had hoped so. The white curtains of the ramen stand parted. "Welcome to Ichiraku Ramen," the owner said. Naruto peered over to his side as he finished his dish and set the bowl down. His blue eyes hardened on the new party. Goji, Mako, and Kira all stared back at him. Looks. "I'll be seeing you then, old man Ichiraku," Naruto calmly said as he passed the last 5 ryo to the man and stepped off the stool. "Come again, Naruto," Tsuchi insisted as a goodbye. Naruto briskly distanced himself from the ramen stand and rounded the corner to the street that led to his apartment complex. He turned his head to watch for his sure that the 3 bullies weren't tailing him home. He found no sign of them and relaxed a bit. He had entered the slums and turned into the alleyways. He used the cover of darkness all the way back to his apartment. He climbed the stairway and scanned to anyone lurking to take advantage of him. He then used his keys to open the door to his home. The door squeaked open and he slipped inside. Pure darkness consumed the apartment as Naruto locked the door closed behind him. He had no electricity, so he feel around for the matches on his nightstand that he used to light the oil lamps around his apartment. Lamplight flooded his apartment enough for him to adequately see, and he waved the lit match out in his hand. Knock, knock, knock. Naruto turned to face his apartment door. His heart instantly pounded inside him. He never received kind visitors unless it was the old man. A thought ran through sudden arrival of company. "Watch your back, demon brat." The threat that the boy made didn't fall on deaf ears. Naruto realized that he was indeed followed by the trio from Ichiraku's. Now, to make up for all the trouble Naruto dragged them into. Knock, knock, knock. Naruto's hands shook from the nerves. Each tap against the door drew out a stronger feeling of anxiety. "Come on out, punk. You knew it was coming one way or another," Kira said through the door. Naruto quietly made his way to the front door. Uncertainty swelled in his chest and made it hard to control his breathing. "Do I open the door or not? If you let us in, I promise that we'll only smash all your shit into 1,000,000 pieces." Mako tried to reason. "We'll take anything valuable too, but I doubt a poor piece you has anything worth taking," Mako clarified. "Open up, shithead. We want to see your face," Goji exclaimed. He sounded like he was right against the door. "If you don't let us in, you're gonna get your head warned," with a menacing sneer. Naruto closed his fists to stop the shaking. They were so tight that his knuckles turned white. Fighting them all at the same time is asking to get knocked out. Or maybe I can talk them down from destroying my apartment. He thought a little naively. He gulped down the saliva that flooded his mouth and sighed. He reached into his back right pocket and pushed his wallet aside for his switchblade. Naruto wanted prepared to defend himself if the boys decided to rush inside the moment the door wasn't locked. The blade was whisked open, and he held it from plain sight behind the door. Naruto then unlocked the door and cracked it open just enough to see face to face. The warm orange lamplight seeped out from his apartment and into the darkness. The trio of visitors were doused in orange light, their wicked grins clearly visible. "What do you want?" he beckoned the trio. "You're not going to make us go away," Mako instantly clarified. "Are you going to take it like a man, or do you want to fight?" Goji asked with an amused expression. "I'd rather not do either," Naruto half-seriously admitted. "That's too bad. You should have thought about that before you got us all in trouble," Kira said. Naruto looked between his visitors in silence for a moment. "Guys, do we really have to do this?" he inquired with a pleading tone. "You brought it on yourself," Mako spat. "Yeah." Naruto was too emotionally drained to feel anger, to feel fed up. He just took their threats with indifference and an emotionless glare. Naruto sighed. He knew what was coming next. He was exhausted and didn't want to do this, but they were forcing it out of him. He can't just roll over and let them to death and ruin his home. He slammed the door shut and locked it. "Hey!" Goji yelled in agitated surprise. "You chose this!" Mako exclaimed through the door. Bang! The door was nearly forced open. One of them was trying to bust in. Bang! Naruto stepped back to make some distance and got ready with his knife. Maybe if they see that I'm armed, they'll leave? Naruto thought. Just for them to try, and when I'm not armed or asleep, he realized. Bang! He knew that if things weren't settled here, then these kids would keep coming back to start trouble. Naruto knew that he had to defend himself from them even if someone got hurt. Bang! The doorway flew off its hinges, followed closely by a body soaring into the room shoulder first. Naruto was overcome with fight or flight. He swung the knife up at his intruder. The feeling of the sharp blade dragging through the parting skin of his enemy's face and almost sickening. The intruding boy tumbled onto the ground and buried his face beneath his hands. Naruto became caked in sweat at the sight of crimson blood crawling through it and seeping down his wrists. His breathing picked up rapidly with the level of adrenaline running through him. "M.I.I.!" Goji cried from the floor. "Goji!" Kira and Mako shouted together as they rushed into the apartment. Naruto backed away from the intruders. Mako swiftly took to aiding his injured friend while Kira looked on in horror. Naruto knew that he had to take advantage of the situation now and pounced at Kira, plunging his switchblade deep into the boy's upper hip. "Ah!" Kira yelled in agony. Naruto's wrist was seized by the boy to stop him from forcing the knife in further. His features were overcome with anger and sweat. Kira arm back. HNNG. His fist rocketed toward Naruto's face, who had no time to react. The fist crashed into Naruto's left cheek like a hammer. His jaw creaked from the force and his head snapped back from the blow. Naruto was consumed by dark and piercing noise rang out in his ears. When Naruto came to his senses, he was on all fours. The taste of iron blanketed his taste buds. That punch made his teeth snap down on his own tongue. "Kira, are you okay?" he heard Mako shout. Naruto powered through his daze and looked at his enemies. Kira had fallen onto the floor, writhing around while his hands pressed down on his wound. The warmth caused the pooling blood on the floor to glisten and gleam orange. "No, I'm not." Kira winced in pain. "You gotta get the knife away from that bastard," he instructed with indignation. Naruto and Mako shared gazes. Naruto's face was one of surprise, but Mako's was painted with anger. "You're dead now," Mako threatened as he stood up and rushed toward Naruto. Naruto no longer had the element of surprise, and these boys were far bigger than him. He knew he couldn't take Mako head-to-head in a fight. He tried to rush to out of the way of his lumbering enemy, but he wasn't fast enough. Mako tackled him into the kitchen of his apartment. They rolled around on the ground as Naruto tried to free himself from the overwhelming strength of the boy. Naruto tried to wriggle out from underneath Mako, but it was to no avail. He slipped his knife out from under the boy and instantly thrust it at his chest. Mako was quicker though and snatched Naruto's hand out of the air and pinned the knife to the floor, twisting Naruto's wrist and slamming his hand into the floor. Pain. Naruto had no choice but to let go of the weapon, which was flung across the apartment. Naruto clenched his teeth. He got his other hand free and socked Mako in the nose, which made the sweat fly off of his face. "Bastard!" Mako yelled with rage and hooked his other hand down to the wooden surface. The struggling duo shared fiery stares. A streak of blood trailed down Mako's right nostril and dripped onto Naruto's black shirt. Naruto got an idea. He tilted he summoned all of his strength, then slammed his head into Mako's nose. Red poured from Mako's nostrils like rain onto Naruto. He watched the tears stream down Mako's cheeks and cup his hands around his nose. Naruto used his free hands to swing on Mako from underneath him. He wailed on the teary-eyed boy, bouncing his head around. Naruto was able to writhe out from Mako and hop to his feet. Naruto unleashed a barrage of attacks. Mako desperately tried to crawl away. When Mako got to the kitchen sink, he tried to stand up, but Naruto would not permit. Mako tried his best to defend himself from Naruto's assault, but it didn't matter. Naruto weaved his fist through Mako's feeble block and drilled him in the chin. He saw boy's teeth snap together and saw his eyes roll into the back of their sockets. Mako's head crashed into the kitchen sink and rattled the towering dishes above until they toppled down over the top of him. Pots, pans, and plates crashed over. Hammered into his skull. He was unable to recover and fell onto the floor face first. Dirty dishes littered the floor. Naruto planted one foot over each side of Mako's figure and turned him over onto his back. His arms lay sprawled out on the ground. Room quaked as Naruto plummeted onto Mako, pinning his arms down with his knees. The boy was hardly conscious. He couldn't defend himself even if he willed it so. Naruto regarded his emotionless face. It angered him, or maybe he was just angry. Circumstances. Today was tough. All Naruto wanted to do now was take it out on Mako, and so he did. He bashed the boy's face in, and his head bounced off the wooden floor after every single strike. The bruises on his knuckles were covered with splat. "This is for calling me trash," he thought as he unleashed another blow into the boy's face. "This is for picking on me," followed up with another blow. "This is for you and me." On and on it went. He took out each and every frustration that plagued his young mind on Mako with brutal violence. Naruto clenched his teeth in anger and unleashed everything he had on the intruder. Attack succeeded attack until Naruto totally gassed out on top of Mako. He chose oxygen he could and wiped the stinging sweat from his pink eyes. Pausing to rest, he hadn't considered the state of Mako's face. His left eye was swollen shut along with his cheeks. His nose was bashed in. Naruto was certain that blood continued to pour from his caved-in nose and seeped into his mouth, staining his teeth red. He couldn't tell for sure, but Naruto thought he saw a gap in his M-tooth used to be as well. Naruto relaxed his shoulders and forced a labored inhale and exhale through his nose. The adrenaline had worn off. His eye hurt like hell and he could barely open swollen shut from that overhand Kira rocked him with. A wave of guilt overcame him. He felt sorry for hurting Mako so brutally. But on the other hand, he realized that Mako wouldn't feel sorry for him if the roles were conflicted within. On one hand, he knew what he had done was wrong, but he equally knew that it felt great to beat the hell out of a bully. Naruto's inward reflection was interrupted by a powerful kick to his face that rattled his brain in his skull. Blood propelled from Naruto's nose as he was knocked from Mako's body and onto the floor. "You will never be forgiven," Goji said as he loomed over him. Naruto saw the long horizontal cut that ran from Goji's cheek and through his left eye. Blood ran down neck. The blonde tried to get up onto his hands and knees, but Goji drove his foot deep into Naruto's gut and forced all the breath from his lungs. He winced at the sound of cracking. Naruto tried to get up again but was met with a crushing kick to the face which liberated a tooth from its place. Naruto felt Goji lift him up onto his feet, and then Southeast Goji locked his hands into a chokehold and held Naruto in place. "Kira," Goji called to his friend. Naruto watched fear-stricken as Kira slowly struggled to get onto his feet and wobbled over to Naruto, who could hardly breathe or as panic set in. Naruto knew that if he didn't do something he was going to suffer greatly. He thrashed wildly, trying to break free of Goji's grip with all of his might. He stronger boy's hands and scratched and clawed at his face, trying to dig his fingers into the boy's split eye, but it was futile. Kira drilled his fist deep into Naruto's stomach. If his throat wasn't closed, he would have vomited on the spot. Kira unleashed a volley of hooks on Naruto's sides. "Tear eyes. You have to pay for everything you've done," Kira said as he looked down at Naruto with disdain. He drove his powerful fists into Naruto's face. Blood streamed due and his teeth tore into the sides of his cheeks with each strike he ate. A few more strikes and the ringing in his ears was too loud for him to make out what Kira was saying as he beat his head in. Naruto's brain was being thrashed in so much that consciousness became fleeting. After a couple more blows, he was only barely conscious. He didn't know where he was or that he was still getting ruthlessly beaten. His tense arms fell to their side, went limp, only moving when they jiggle after his face had to eat another brutal attack. Naruto could see the blackness closing in around him. He felt content with the idea of dying here. At least he wouldn't need to wrestle with being hated or dealing loneliness anymore. He never asked for any of this. He didn't even get to choose to join the Ninja Academy. In that moment, he understood that he never had any, that this life was chosen for him. Whether it was by his parents or the village didn't matter. Naruto could faintly feel Goji drop him onto the ground face first. His squinted blue eyes were dim, but they latched onto Kira, who towered over him with a revulsed his foot high over Naruto's head and slammed it down over him. "Please let it end," was all Naruto managed to think at that moment, and the brutal curb stomp crashed down on top of his skull, careening him into a valley of infamy a weird way. He found it comforting. The sheet of darkness over the forest was fleeing from the sun. It was early. Hiruzen wasn't sure, but it must have been 6 in the morning. Dew blanketed the grass and leaves. The bodies had been placed in bags. Cleanup was nearing completion. Hiruzen was worn out directing the damage control process. Even though he was almost finished, he felt no sense of accomplishment and trusted Shikaku to take care of things in the village center for now. There were more pressing matters to attend to here in the outskirts. A large tent was pitched some meters away from the scene. Hiruzen had the child put away there to be watched closely and protected. His cries had long ceased and surmised that the baby was entrenched in a deep sleep. Now that the situation had been relatively contained, he was ready to begin discussing about how things would proceed after the attack. He could have begun with his assistant, but he felt it more prominent to address another party first, Jiraiya. The toad hermit had been silent since he found the battlefield. He sat on a felled tree next to their body bags, left to his lonesome to brood. Hiruzen found his stud almost eerie, but with Minato's final wish, this wasn't something he could avoid. He gathered his composure and met the wounded hermit to his right. Jiraiya had made no sign of acknowledgement to Hiruzen. He probably did not even realize that his master was there. He just continued to stare distantly into the kobags. Hiruzen opened his mouth to interject before Jiraiya cut him off. "I failed them," he mumbled, never breaking his sight with the bags. "They needed me to be here and I couldn't make it." He spoke somberly, gnashing his teeth in, "Why couldn't you make it? Where were you?" Hiruzen beckoned. There was no way that Jiraiya didn't know about the Ninetales attack. And Hiruzen knew best of Master that he should have been there to tackle the fox before even himself. Jiraiya's dim eyes met Hiruzen's. He sighed and lowered his gaze to the floor in disappointment. "I was attacked," he spoke through labored tones. Hiruzen stood still, quietly analyzing this information. "Did you take care of them?" he asked his student. Jiraiya locked his hands together and positioned them between his knees as he readjusted his posture atop the tree. "No," he spoke bluntly. Hiruzen's eyebrows quirked in surprise. There weren't many people that Hiruzen knew in all his years that could escape from Jiraiya. This person must have been Khan's. "Well, what happened?" Hiruzen dug further. "We fought to a standstill until the fox disappeared from the village," he explained to his master. "After that, they fled the scene." Hiruzen knew better than to leave this to coincidence. He needed to know who this person was. It was a matter of grave importance to work towards securing his V. "Do you know who they were?" "The whole battle they were hooded beneath a black cloak, but something about them caught my eye." The sage's words lingered on his lips. "Go on, son." "They had some glaring yellow eyes and black splotches on their skin. Reminded me of Anko," Jiraiya revealed blankly. Hiruzen's eyes bulged. A faint gasp eluded his mouth. His wrinkled face froze over into a scowl. He knew what this entailed. "You think Orochimaru had something to attack?" Jiraiya was silent. He turned away from Hiruzen's sight. It looked like he was regarding the body bags again. His face slouched into an expression of debilitating sad features were swiftly hardened into a fiery stern look. "I know Orochimaru had something to do with it." His lowly voice bellowed matter-of-factly. Hiruzen pursed his lips. He could feel the wrinkles and crow's feet on his face becoming more pronounced. The quiet lingered between master and pupil for a moment, a lot on his mind, and Orochimaru was the last person he needed to know was rearing his head now. But he had duties to uphold. "I'll have the ANBU investigate. See if he left anything of use for us to track him down," Hiruzen explained. "They'll never find him," the hermit said bluntly. "I should have been hunting him down from the beginning, back when he left." His face, scrunched up with frustration, welled up with regret. "You can't chase him down," Hiruzen was quick to reply. "Now that Naruto has no parents, Minato wished for you to raise him." Jiraiya's white mane jostled as he whirled his head around to Hiruzen. He shot up from his seated position, slack-jawed. Hiruzen noticed the emotions on his student, thoughts raced through his mind, eventually settling on a look between disbelief and indignation. "That can't be," Jiraiya fought. "I can't raise a child," he swore. "It was Minato's final wish," Hiruzen stated with a firm tone. "The boy needs someone to take care of him." Jiraiya's teeth snapped together in a grimace. He was silent. His eyes did a swift dance between the bodies and the tent a number of times before they settled at high brows just in community forum beta's story anime/manga/anime/Naruto/anime/Naruto/plus. "I'm not a father," the hermit said through hushed tones. "I can't raise him," he spoke with finality. Hiruzen's stomach did a somersault. He knew Jiraiya was wrestling with his shortcomings, but he would never take him for the type to abandon his student's child. "What are you going to do then?" he wished to understand. "We both know that this was an organized attack," the maned man stated. "I'm going to hunt down Orochimaru and find out what he's up to," Jiraiya said. Hiruzen huffed with an air of frustration and crossed his arms over his chest. "Why are you doing this to the boy?" he beckoned. Jiraiya's face was pelted with guilt. "I can't look at him knowing I couldn't do anything to save Minato or Kushina." Hiruzen tried his hardest not to feel disgusted at his pupil's display. To think he would care for rain orphans for years but not Minato's child. I won't leave him with nothing, Jiraiya clarified. Have him taken care of at my apartment in the slums. It's low profile, so he'll be away from the public eye and no damn orphanage, he said as he tossed Hiruzen the keys. You're being ridiculous, Hiruzen spat. I'll pay for everything out of my pocket. Clothes, food, bills. The money isn't drying up anytime soon, Jiraiya said in quiet tones. And here, he dug into the pouch. Give him this when he's older. He held out a green frog wallet. Hiruzen's eyes focused on the wallet and back to the hermit. I'll come back when I'm ready. Jiraiya gestured for Hiruzen to take the wallet from him again. Hiruzen pushed aside his reluctance to accept Jiraiya's terms. How long do you plan to avoid this? He said as he snatched the wallet from the sage's hand. It was, I'll keep in touch, Jiraiya finished, ignoring Hiruzen's question and then disappearing in a body flicker. The leaves danced in the wind where he stood. Hiruzen had been replaying the conversation on repeat in his mind for days. It was the last time he and Jiraiya had seen each other face to face in over 10 years. And even though Jiraiya never fell behind on sending letters or updates on high work or Orochimaru's whereabouts, Hiruzen could feel it in the air, the anxiety of confronting him again after a decade. He paced back and forth in his office, taking swift, labored draws from his tobacco pipe. The smoke danced in the air. He hadn't thought to open the window. Jiraiya was coming back today. On one hand, Hiruzen was thankful and excited to see him. On the other, the circumstances of his return weren't how Hiruzen advised. The break-in was brutal. Naruto had been in the hospital for 6 days. He hadn't shown any signs of waking up. None of the medical specialists in the ANBU knew Hokoma. All of the broken ribs and missing teeth had long healed, but the powers of the fox had limits. You're going to need to relax. Panicking isn't going to do anything, Shikaku chimed from the corner of the room. He leaned against the wall with his hands wrist-deep pants pockets. Hiruzen shot him an indignant glance. You'd be right if there wasn't a good reason to panic, he bitterly argued. The elders are motioning to remove the Ninetales since he is showing no signs of waking up, so forgive me if I am a bit bothered. He spat. Shikaku fetched a brand new cigarette from a pack in his pocket and lit it. These things take time. Jiraiya will be here soon. Together we will find a way to resolve, Shikaku calmly reasoned before puffing on his cigarette. We're on borrowed time, Hiruzen clarified. The longer Naruto is comatose, the more likely that the elders will have him killed. The village doesn't have an active J now. Do you even understand how catastrophic it would be if that information leaked to the other villages? Yeah, I'm painfully aware, the Nara acknowledged. The fact is that Jiraiya had to get here from Takigakure, Shikaku added. He was never going to show up. Took the NBU 3 days to find him, he remarked. We can't do anything right now. Might as well let cool heads prevail. Hiruzen didn't respond. Once he's here, what do you suggest we do? He asked, changing the subject. Jiraiya isn't a medic nin, which is what we need right now. That's a good question, Shikaku said and took another draw from his cigarette. Most medic nins can't even treat a coma anyways, he pointed out. But Jiraiya we don't. Hiruzen's eyes squinted with curiosity. What's that? Connections, Shikaku said, blowing swirls of smoke out of his nose. His spy network reaches every nation on the continent. Damn perv knows more about the Mizukage does, he half-joked. If anyone knew how to find a skilled enough medical specialist to wake someone from a coma, it would be him, he concluded. Hiruzen regarded the Nara's point and let it run through his brain. He's got a valid point. Top. A knock on the window panes rang throughout the Hokage office. Hiruzen turned to observe the noise. The sight was overwhelmingly nostalgic. Jiraiya waited behind the glass for him to open the window and let him inside. He neved door. He sprang to the windows with haste, unlocking it and flinging it open as swiftly as he could. The cloudy tobacco smoke jetted out of the room and assaulted Jiraiya outside. He waved the smoke out of his face and leaped into the room. I came as quickly as I could, the sage swore. Hiruzen regarded him with worry, and he could tell that Jiraiya was doing much the same. There's no time for sweet reunions, Shikaku cut in. Hiruzen dug himself out of his thoughts. He's right. We need to act quickly, he started. Jiraiya, we were hoping. Jiraiya threw his hand up to halt him. Before that, let me see him, Jiraiya sternly requested. Hiruzen knew that now wasn't the time, but he similarly knew that Jiraiya needed some sort of connection to the boy. Something to bring them closer, close enough to take him under and put aside the failures of the past. If seeing him beaten into a coma was what it took for Jiraiya to finally step up, then who was Hiruzen to get in that opportunity? "Follow me," Hiruzen instructed. Naruto had been placed in the ANBU hospital within the greater ANBU Black Ops compound. It was a short, brisk, silent walk, but soon enough Hiruzen was being W by ANBU and ignoring the glances he got with him and Jiraiya back together. He approached a hospital room door. "He's inside," he said after a long pause, staring into the dark room at the hospital bed. He grasped the door handle and caref upon entry, he flipped the light switch on. The dark room was flooded with bright, pale light and revealed the melancholy that was hidden in the darkness. Jiraiya stepped in behind him and Shikaku shut the door when they were all inside. Hiruzen took a seat at the foot of the bed. Silence befell the trio as they each to examining Naruto's state. He was hooked up to an 4-drip and a Venturi mask obscured his features to ensure he kept breathing. A feeding tube had to be inserted down his nose so that he nutrients. A mint green blanket was tucked around him up to his armpits and he sported a hospital gown. The little boy appeared almost peaceful. 3 academy kids broke into the apartment and beat him half to death, Shikaku clarified to Jiraiya. Hiruzen paid careful attention to Jiraiya. He didn't verbally respond to Shikaku's adage, but Hiruzen saw the guilt well up in the contours of his face. Irika found him the next day after school, went to see why he didn't show up, found him in a puddle of dried blood. The Nara continued. "We found the kids get the Konoha hospital for some pretty serious injuries. They've been expelled from the academy and their families have been fined." Jiraiya was silent, still taking it all in. Hiruzen took the Hokage cap from the top of his head and laid it in his lap. "We need to wake him up soon or the council will replace," Hiruzen told him. "If he can't wake up, then even I can't blame them for changing hosts. Without a Jinchuriki, the land of fire might as well be defenseless," somberly admitted. Jiraiya bit his bottom lip and winced. "What do you want me to do?" "We need you to find someone who can cure the coma," Shikaku interjected. "Do you have anyone in mind?" Hiruzen inquired. Jiraiya rubbed his chin in deep contemplation. "There's only one person that comes to mind." "Who?" Hiruzen dug further. "Tsunade." Hiruzen's intrigue was piqued. His eyes grew wider and his eyebrows slanted. "You know where she is?" "I got a pretty good idea." Hiruzen shared a glance of intrigue with Shikaku. "Finding her isn't the hard part," Jiraiya butted in. "It's going to be bringing her back that will be difficult." Shikaku fought off an eye roll. "Of course it wouldn't be simple," he moaned. "You don't have anyone else in mind?" "She hasn't been spotted in over 15 years, Jiraiya," Hiruzen stated. "How long have you had a pretty good idea about where she's been?" He challenged his PU back before she left. "On our last mission with Orochimaru, we had gone to the land of rivers," the sage started. "Place was infamously torn apart in the first Gria wind and the fire," Jiraiya explained. "We're talking rampant poverty, famine, disease. A huge chunk of the land was poisoned after the disastrous battle of Taniga," reminisced with a saddened glare. "What does any of this have to do with Tsunade?" Shikaku interjected. "She was the most affected by all of it," Jiraiya said. "Seeing all the sick and dying in the streets, no one to help them, that stuck with her," he revealed. "But in Rec Land of Rivers has been seeing some vast improvements. The Tani Medical Facility is one of the most prestigious in the entire world," he explained. The dots were connecting in Hiruzen's mind now, but he wasn't 100% convinced just yet. "This doesn't really prove that Tsunade is in Tani." "Oh, really?" Jiraiya bellowed. "You don't think it's interesting that the greatest and only multinational medical facility in the world was only created just over a deck, one of the poorest nations in the world at that?" The Toad Hermit shot back. "It's not difficult to see." Hiruzen and Shikaku shared another glance between each other and back at Jiraiya. "If anyone could manage a miracle like that, it would be Tsunade," Hiruzen admitted. "You raise some valid points," Shikaku agreed. "But that still isn't a guarantee that Tsunade will return with you. She despises the great nations, and that's doubly Konoha." The Nara reasoned. Jiraiya humphed. "That could be the case," he acknowledged. "But consider the circumstances. If I cannot convince Tsunade to come back and heal Naruto, I can send another medical specialist at the facility. It's the greatest in the world. Not everyone's Tsunade, but there has to be someone skilled enough to wake him up." Hiruzen was convinced. Jiraiya's plan seemed concrete enough to work. Sure, he would prefer that Jiraiya bring Tsunade back to the village, but what was important, Naruto got proper treatment. Okay, Hiruzen started. This plan will suffice. Fantastic, said Jiraiya. I'll leave tonight. Tanagakure is another 3-day trip. All goes well, I'll be back in a week. The hermit clarified. Don't forget what's at stake here, Hiruzen shot. Not only is Naruto precious and a Jinchuriki, but his seal is irreplaceable, he stated. With his seal, he could live 50s, much older than any other Jinchuriki. Exactly, the Nara agreed. He could be Konoha's first perfect Jinchuriki ever, he explained. And I know you can't forget what it took to make that seal. Hiruzen was stern. Don't let it go to waste either. Hiruzen could not overstate how important keeping was. Jiraiya frowned and then collected his determination with a stern look. I won't mess this up, he stated. It was emphasized with the conviction in his voice. And what will you do after he's woken up? Hiruzen finally got around to asking. Jiraiya tensed up like he was struck by lightning. Hiruzen could tell that the hermit wanted to avoid this confrontation. The sage rubbed the back of his neck nervously, avoiding eye contact with his master. I'm still not ready for that, Jiraiya admitted through a pained express frown. Shikaku audibly scoffed with disgust and Hiruzen scowled at his old pupil. So then what? You get him help and disappear again? You've already avoided him for hot childhood. Hiruzen's bitter tongue quipped. Jiraiya winced at his master's harsh tone. I just can't do it, he admitted. There's no excuse for it, I know, but I just don't have it in me. The white-maned Shinab defeated glare. But you're right, I shouldn't leave him high and dry, so I won't, he stated. Hiruzen took a step back in surprise. You mean you'll take care of him? I'll find someone who will for the time being. Any hope that Jiraiya would do something to salvage his morality died within Hiruzen with a loud bang. Are you being serious? He exclaimed with a ferocious air of disbelief. It's better than leaving him all alone, Jiraiya defended. Plus, it won't be forever. I'll pick up the slack eventually, I promise. Hiruzen ground his teeth together. You're a lousy excuse for a godfather, Jiraiya. He stood up and fixed his hat on his head. I can barely believe you trained Mina, he spat. Jiraiya's ears perked up and he adopted a look of indignation. That's unfair, Hiruzen-sensei, he retorted. I'm doing what I can here. You and I both know what its student who was near and dear. It's not something you just easily get over. Hiruzen's anger fizzled out at this comment. Jiraiya was right. He did understand the pain of losing a student, someone you looked at like a son. It's hard to look out of them and know you failed them. But that wasn't any reason to abandon a child either. Jiraiya was in a unique position and Hiruzen recognized this, which is why H sympathized. Hiruzen heaved an exhaustive sigh. You need to get it together, Jiraiya, he started. At this rate, the boy is going to grow up never having known you. Jiraiya looked over to Naruto. Hiruzen could see the disappointment and self-loathing embedded deep into his person. Jiraiya probably felt just as angry about what to Naruto, maybe even angrier. I'll get things done, Jiraiya assured in a low tone as he made his way to the hospital window and parted the curtains that blocked the sunlight from the room. He said with a sense of resoluteness and reassurance. Hiruzen felt that he directed it more towards Naruto than anyone else. Jiraiya exited the room through the W. What are you thinking? Hiruzen asked his advisor. He's a lousy godfather, but he always pulls through somehow, Shikaku reasoned. I hope so, Hiruzen added. I wish I could do more for Naruto myself, he admitted. Shikaku leaned against the wall as usual. We both know that would be career suicide, the Nara bluntly added. The Hokage looking out for the demon brat would both your heads, he pointed out. Hiruzen sighed and rubbed down his face. Yeah, he mouthed blankly. What a disgraceful situation for a child. One that helped save the village at that. He spoke. It's not any of our faults, the Nara said. Danzo's the one that spread the rumor he was the Ninetales, Shikaku argued. We both know he didn't want the Fox Fa anyone's hands but his own. Imagine what he could have done if the Biju ended up en route. Hiruzen grimaced. I never thought Danzo would grow to be such an evil person, he admitted. To him, Naruto is just a waste of a Jinchuriki, Shikaku added. If the Ninetales can't be brainwashed and taught by him to do what he wants, then what's the point? Different when Kushina was alive. Harder to kill a ninja, but killing a kid that everyone hates, that's easy. If only he wasn't so damn invincible, Hiruzen said. He has too much weight to throw around for me to just apprehend him. Who knows what his route Nbu Wal seized? Hiruzen pondered in horror. Danzo has his clutches around so many crafty ninja. Toryun, Fu, Yamato even managed to snag Kohyuga. Our village cannot Danzo without great risk from this level of underlings at his disposal. What's important is that he knows you got your eye on him, Shikaku pointed out. If he had the ability to do away with you, he would have done it by now. We just sure he doesn't get any more control in the village, he argued. I'm just hoping that he drops dead soon, Hiruzen admitted. Heh, we both know that isn't happening. Not with our luck. Shikaku paused for a moment, wiping the smirk from his face. Do you really trust Jiraiya to find some after Naruto? He changed the subject. Hiruzen was fossilized, taking a moment to contemplate an answer. Jiraiya has more than enough shortcomings, but he's got Naruto's best interest at heart. He'll say things work. If you say so, Shikaku said. Not sure I'd trust him to do the same for my kid though, in all honesty, he admitted. It's the best Naruto's got right now, Hiruzen stated. Jiraiya has to get a hold of himself and put his failures aside or he'll never be able to confront Naruto. The sun barely peeked over the walls of the village border. Jiraiya approached the walled checkpoint with an air of caution. Tanigakure did not treat wind and fire ninjas amicably. As he reached the two border guards strapped into their river blue vests, the constant chatter of the bustling urban sprawl behind the walls warded off any silence. Voices rang out in messy, uncoordinated unison, which reminded one of how threatening the size of Tanigakure was. State your business, the Tani ninja commanded Jiraiya. Visiting friends. Jiraiya glanced from guard to gauge their thoughts. How long will you be in the village? The other guard beckoned. A day. Both guards shared concerned glances with one another, leaving Jiraiya aloof. Passport. The guard reached his hand out to Jiraiya, ready to take his passport. Oh, Jiraiya yelped. Of course, I forgot to have it ready, he said as he frantically dug into his pouch and retrieved an orange frog wallet. Here you go. He laid to the guard's hand. No way, the guard mumbled as he scrutinized the document. What? The other guard beckoned. Jiraiya already knew where this was going. You were right, the other guy muttered in a mix of disbelief and defeat. Told you it was Jiraiya of the Sannin. The other guard laughed. The oil head protector is an iconic giveaway, he boasted. Jiraiya had to fight off a smirk. Felt good being famous. What is a damn Konohanin like you doing in Tani? The guard scowled at Jiraiya. The smirk fell off his face. Oh, right, Jiraiya recalled after being taken aback. I'm infamous in Tanigakure. He cleared his throat. I'm just here to meet a friend. Yeah, right. No good ever comes from Konoha, especially from big-name shinobi like yourself. Jiraiya frowned. I understand that you guys have bad blood with the Land of Fire, but I promise that I'm not here to cause any trouble. Both the guards shared another glance. Jiraiya could see the anger melt away in their faces. Sure, they hated Konoha and Jiraiya by extension, but what could they Sannin out of their village? Each of them grew indignant. The guard with Jiraiya's passport tossed it back to him. Just don't mess around, he warned. Each guard stepped aside and Jiraiya slipped by them, through the wall and into Tani proper. The immediate rotten stench of the filth in the streets assaulted Jiraiya's nose. An assortment of trash and homeless speckled the sidewalks and the alleyways. No, behold, what remnants remained were long dead, failed attempts to try and grow something in the poisoned earth. The dirt path led deeper into the village center and then forked away into the village outskirts. Jiraiya paced down the street with caution, putting his head protecto off any unwanted recognition. In most nations Jiraiya visited, the homeless were usually veteran shinobi or the impoverished left to wallow in squalor. Tani was different. Even 15 years later, the homeless issue is only marginally better outside of the village center. Seeing all the sick and dying writhing around crannies of the village reminded Jiraiya of the horror and violence of the shinobi. Sometimes he couldn't help but regret being a ninja. These people were innocents cast out of their homes and left to decay far away from anyone else. They had the misfortune of eating or drinking the wrong thing. The land of rivers was scarred. The wind and fire used it as stomping grounds in the First Great War. At the time of the First War, the Sand was desperate to bray a leaf-occupied village of Tanigakure and get its hands on the integral supply hub and farmland. Under an up-and-coming kunoichi who was skilled with poisons, Chie the Wind launched a devastating assault on the Konoha shinobi. A great victory under the wind's belt, if not for the caravans of poison being set ablaze in the chaos. A toxic cloud of gas began to form, poisoning the air, and Kelsey choked to death. In desperation, the shinobi of both villages had to work together to put the fires out. When all was said and done, the poison had soaked into the water, permanently wilting away the trees and greenery. The Battle of Tanagakure has since been acknowledged as one of the worst military disasters ever. The poison clouds eventually got into the rain, and after a while, a large portion of the land of rivers could not be used to grow crops or raise farm animals. The creatures that died from the poison could not be eaten out of fear of being poisoned by it. All the people who are unfortunate enough to be compromised are banished village center and forced to die in the outskirts where the rest of the homeless and sick are, spending their final days in long abandoned, dilapidated buildings and straw huts. It was tough on Jiraiya to see what became of a once prosperous nation, but he could only imagine the impact it had on Tsunade. At the fork in the road was a sign. It read, "Tanny Center straight ahead," and a subheading clarified that any sick past this point will be killed. The bottom part of directions for the road away from the village center. Tanny Medical Facility was written with a simple directory arrow. Browse just in community forum beta's story anime/manga/anime/Naruto/anime/Naruto/ plus. Jiraiya turned off the main path and followed the sign's instructions. It led into the decaying valley away from the more urban regions. Jiraiya noticed how the grass that remained in the soil were pale and wilted as he walked by. After a few miles of trudging through the once luscious valleys of Tanagakure, he spotted a settling between the hills. Several dozen tents were sprawled out just beyond the gated confines of a much larger campus. The gated community consisted of several well-built buildings that around a larger center building. Compared to the half-a-century-old and abandoned structures of the Tanny outskirts, this campus was brand new. Top-of-the-line cons. Jiraiya approached the tents. Each of them harbored several ill and dying. As he strolled past the tents, a sudden yell made him halt in his tracks. All the sick have to stay in their designated tents. A specialist will be with you shortly, the voice boomed. Jiraiya turned to meet the voice. A Tanny ninja stood behind the gate watching Jiraiya expectantly, waiting for him to go to a tent. Actually, Jiraiya stammered and walked toward him. "I'm not sick. I'm trying to get inside the campus." The Tanny shinobi gave Jiraiya a scrutinizing squint. "And why do you need inside the campus, exactly?" "I'm supposed to meet with someone inside," Jiraiya said bluntly. The Tanny ninja rolled his eyes. "Aha, look. No unauthorized outsiders are allowed on facility grounds." He pointed to the road that leads away from the campus. "Now," Jiraiya frowned. "I was sent here by Daimyo Kawadoku to discuss with the head doctors." He reached into his pouch and dug around for a scroll. "See, here you go. Scroll over the gate and to the guard. A letter from the daimyo authorizing my visit," he said with his arms crossed. "We'll see about that." The guard unfurled the scroll to read its contents when a flash of light burst from the parchment. The guard started to fall to the ground. Bifo hopped the gate and caught him gracefully. "You'll only be out for a few hours. It was only a genjutsu," Jiraiya whispered to the Tanny ninja. "Bastard," the guard mumbled before slipping away into unconsciousness. Jiraiya placed the guard's limp body up against the gate and studied his features for a few moments before a confident humph escaped his lips. He put his hands Tog sign, body transformation jutsu. A cloud of white, wispy smoke engulfed his person, and what emerged was no longer Jiraiya, merely the Tanny shinobi. "This will disguise for now," he reassured himself. The body transformation jutsu physically altered the appearance for as long as one was able to maintain it, and it was MUC discover then the normal transformation jutsu. He turned toward the great buildings erected on the campus. With no clue about where Tsunade could be within these buildings, Jiraiya decided that the greatest best bet, considering it is the heart of the medical facility. He strolled through the doorway of the facility and was greeted by the receptionist. "Where are you off to, Gato?" Jiraiya mentally noted that the guard he was impersonating was named Gato. "I was hoping to speak with the head doctor if that was possible." "Ha ha," the receptionist smirked. "Why are you acting so formal?" She giggled. "You'll find Dr. Irio in the conference room on the top floor." Jiraiya smiled back. "Thank you," and he walked to the stairway up to the final floor. His whole way up the stairs, something weighed on his mind. He had no clue who Dr. Irio was. He had assumed that if Tsunade was here, she would certainly be RU. It appeared that wasn't the case though. Regardless of whether or not Tsunade ran the show, Jiraiya was going to have to find a way to negotiate with the facility to medical specialist to Konoha. At the top of the stairs, he was faced with two hallways lined with different doors. He scanned his surroundings for a sign. Seeing that one was hanging from the C corridor directly ahead was where Jiraiya would find the conference room. He paced down the hallway, quickly searching for the door that read conference before he finally found it. Peeking through the small, rectangular window in the D3 separate women discussing amongst each other at the conference table. All of them sported white coats like any doctor. One of them wore a pair of glasses and had blonde hair that was put into a bun. The other was a black-haired lady. Of the table was a woman with shoulder-length brown hair who was currently passing around a packet of paperwork to the others. Jiraiya made a single hand sign and created a clone that shared his disguise but wore a mask over his features and a pair of glasses to seem different from his Orig stood at the door like an entirely different guard. After examining each of them for a moment, Jiraiya was a bit disappointed to not recognize the likes of Tsunade in the room. She wasn't the end-all be-all, though. Knob of the door and walked inside, knocking on the frame only after he had stepped inside. The conversation between the trio halted and was succeeded by a moment of silence. "Yes?" the lady passing out papers asked. "Oh, Gato, what did you need? I was wondering if I could discuss something with you all," Jiraiya said, feigning nervousness. "Could I grab a seat here?" He motioned to the seat next to the dark-headed ladies. "Sure. Is there something wrong?" the brunette woman prodded. Jiraiya took his seat. "No, not at all," he assured them as he quickly glanced at each of their designated name tags pinned to their white coats. The blonde was Dr. Black-haired woman was Dr. Kato, who felt familiar for some reason, and that left the woman next to him who was Dr. Irio. "Well, what's the matter then?" Dr. Karuki said as she adjusted her glasses. Jiraiya paused. This was going to be the hard part of the mission. Medical facilities won't just hand over a skilled surgeon to a hidden village. That is a good way to medical knowledge stolen and lose a lot of money because of it. Jiraiya was also certain that they wouldn't take kindly to finding out that he wasn't even Gato, and for them, he wasn't supposed to be here at all. Furthermore, he was on borrowed time and he was well aware of that. Sure, he was disguised for now, but the truth was that eventually the original guard would be facility security wasn't top-notch. Probably because the diversity of the staff and volunteers brought the establishment a sense of immunity. If anyone attacked, he would be an attack on top-of-the-line medical specialists from all the great nations. He didn't have any tricks up his sleeve or clever leading questions to get him closer to Tsunade or any doctor for that matter. "All I need is a doctor to travel with me," Jiraiya said through his disguise. Each of the doctors quirked their eyebrows out of confusion. "To travel with you where?" Dr. Kato beckoned. "And why?" Dr. Irio added. Jiraiya's face was stern. "I need a highly skilled medical specialist to travel with me to Konoha," he admitted honestly. "There is someone there. Their very import little boy. He's in a coma and no one can wake him up." Karuki managed a gasp. "You're not even Gato," Irio scowled. "You broke into my facility to ask for my help?" Her tongue quipped with disgust. Jiraiya remained perfectly calm. "I know that it's wrong of me. Nobody got hurt. I just seek your cooperation on this. I'm willing to pay for everything. What's your wish for this to go over as smoothly and amicably as possible?" Most important to Jiraiya was that the deal was struck quickly, first and foremost. He had no intent around the matter. Irio and Karuki both scoffed. "We don't take bribes from the great nations," Irio said. "We have no interest in getting involved with them at all." "That can't be," Jiraiya protested. "Why not?" Irio crossed her arms over her chest. "The great nations are greedy. We can't trust our highly trained doctors to go out to the hidden villages and come back alive for the kind of knowledge we possess, tortured to spill our secrets. The sand already can't stand us learning how to neutralize their poisons." Jiraiya was silenced. The idea that they wouldn't even cooperate with him just because of his village was infuriating. He cursed his honesty up and down, but he did shot to get a doctor to the Leaf. "I'm sure you have at least one doctor who would be willing to return to Konoha if I spoke with them," he revealed with a hint of desperation. "They're a hero in Ko, have immunity in the village, and would be under no threat." Dr. Kato perked up to his right. "Who do you mean?" "I know Tsunade of the Sannin is here," he said. Dr. Kato and Dr. Irio each shared shocked expressions. Karuki remained oblivious as to what Jiraiya was saying. At the door, Jiraiya's clone stepped into the room. "Shit," Jiraiya raged. "The guards have found me out." Jiraiya stood from his chair next to Irio. "Take the one with the glasses just in case," Jiraiya instructed his clone. "What?" Karuki yelped as Jiraiya's clone seized her by the arm and held a kunai to her throat. Dr. Kato screamed in horror as Jiraiya put a kunai of his own against Irio's neck and pressed it against her jugular. Bastard! Irio cursed under her breath. Bang! The door to the conference room was kicked in, revealing an entire platoon of Tani ninja and the clanging of their drawn weapons. Dr. Irio, the facility has been compromised. There is an intrud. The Tani ninja halted at the sight of two of the most important doctors in the facility being held as hostages. Let's all remain calm, Jiraiya began. I have no intention of hurting anybody. What about your friend? One of the ninjas beckoned. He's not gonna do anything unnecessary. What do you want? Another Tani ninja asked. First, I want you to lower your weapons onto the floor, Jiraiya began. Each of the shinobi looked at one another, trying to gauge whether or not that was a good idea. Jiraiya pressed the kunai harder into Irio's throat, causing a streak of crimson blood to run down her neck. I won't ask again, he warned. The ninjas calmly placed their weapons onto the ground. Now what? One of them asked. Now we negotiate, Jiraiya said. Here's the deal. I know that there has to be a doctor here willing to travel with me to Konoha. His calm tone taunted the intense room. I need you to fetch me that doctor, or I'm going to have to take one of these two in her stead. He motioned towards Irio and Karuki. What doctor do you want specifically? The Tani ninjas asked. I need Tsunade of the Sannin, he proclaimed. A silence filled the air, which only added to the tension. The Tani shinobi looked at each other, all confused glances. Tsunade of the Sannin does not work at this FAC, them finally spoke up. Jiraiya's features were consumed with an air of confusion. He saw the look that Dr. Kato and Dr. Irio shared. They didn't look like they had seen a ghost for no reason. He heaved a deep, disappointed sigh, as if let down by Tsunade herself. Fine, he groaned. He shot a nod to his clone, who tied Karuki's wrists together with wire, the same with Irio. What are you doing? One of the Tani ninja called out. A deal is a deal. I'm taking both of them to Konoha. Don't follow me, and I can assure you they'll walk away from this alive. I'll still pay them handsomely too. Jira calmly as he tightened the wire around Irio's wrists. Now then, we'll be leaving. Jiraiya and his clone turned their hostages to face them. The clone placed Karuki on his shoulder, while Irio was struggling against her binds. Don't fight it, miss, Jiraiya instructed. Things will go over easier if you calm. Bang! Jiraiya's vision went black. A piercing ringing bounced around in his head. He stumbled back a couple of steps. His eyes watered. He opened them again and was blurred reality. He felt a streak coming down his nose to his chin. He wiped his face and examined his hand, which was coated in crimson blood. Hey, you busted, M said. That's a pretty good headbutt. It's a miracle my transformation held up. He commended as he wiped his eyes of the tears. He opened them back again. His vision was clear. He scanned the room and his eyes rested on Irio. An expression of surprise erupted from him at the sight. She wrists, freed from the wire that confined her. It would take a real brute to break out of that ninja wire, he thought. Her face was made determined. Her aura was frightening her own guards, who stepped away to create distance from her. Are you done now? Jiraiya taunted. Irio replied, Okay then. Jiraiya stepped forward, laying his hand upon her shoulder, ready to apprehend her once again. She snatched his wrist from the air. Jiraiya pulled back, but her grip was iron. His stomach was doing backflips, realizing he was caught. His wide eyes met hers as a low stance and drew her fist back. Jiraiya threw his free arm over his face to prepare. Irio unleashed a devastating overhand that crashed into his narrowly prot bone-crushing force. The overwhelming power exerted on him from the blow was causing the flooring to creak and snap apart. Jiraiya uttered a pained grunt as Irio sent him flying diagram the floor. His body made the wind whistle as he soared through the wall of the building and fell another 4 stories into the campus grounds. What monstrous strength, he thought as he skidded across the earth like a flat stone on the water. The air escaped his lungs as he slammed into a tree, felling it. His aching back rested against the trunk while he gasped for breath. His vision whirled around in circles from the dizziness. Bang! He gathered his composure really quickly when he heard a thunderous crash. He swung his head up to the 5th floor, watching concrete and wood debris crash into below. Such brutish strength, he thought, watching Irio punch the wall completely open. A crowd of Tani ninja formed at the hole, ready to perform an assault on Jiraiya. If any of you ninja leave the room, I'll kill the hostage, he heard his clone declare the room. He sighed and perched his hand on his knee to leverage his weight. There's no mistaking it, he thought as he stood up straight. Irio stepped off the 5th floor and ground in a wide stance. Only one person I know can sock me like that. I'm impressed. Irio stood up straight. Most ninja would have died from that punch. Jiraiya and Irio stared across from each other, only 50 paces apart. Jiraiya shrugged his shoulders. I'm not most shinobi. He dropped into a wide stance with his lead palm outstretched and his bald fist next to his head. A grin, something tells me you're not most medic nin. Humph, we'll see about that. She scowled at him as she dropped into a taijutsu stance of her own. They each narrowed their gazes at one another before Irio gritted her teeth, resolving herself to begin. Jiraiya watched her lean carefully into her right foot, only drew her as she dashed right on top of him. Impressive speed. Her fist was already drawn back to prepare another lead overhand. Jiraiya sidestepped her strike. The punch blew his hair and clothes around. Jiraiya took initiative, clearing a hook at her face. Irio casually caught it with her left hand. Her grasp was inescapable. She threw a deadly straight that Jiraiya bear duck under. He shifted his weight to his off foot and spun around, breaking his hand free of her grip to then retaliate with an explosive crescent kick that careened T-head. She managed to block it, but the follow-through was heavy. It slammed her away, making her skip across the surface. She only stopped by digging her feet into the Jiraiya took advantage of the newfound distance and threw his hands together to form the snake sign. The chakra gathered inside him like a great maelstrom. Irio to create more distance. Jiraiya dashed away too, flashing through the monkey and tiger seals in midair. He briefly caught sight of Irio racing through her own sign, sucked in a deep breath that filled his lungs and puffed out his chest. He swung his hands up to his chest as he felt the fire crawl up his throat and erupt from his ferocity. Fire style. Great fireball jutsu. A stream of fire escaped his lips, which rapidly grew into a massive, raging boulder of concentrated flame soaring directly at Irio. The cloud of fire tumbled forward, into the earth as it went. The sweat rolled down Jiraiya's forehead, stinging his eyes. A sizzling hiss emanated from the fireball and pierced Jiraiya's ears. Squinting to get a better look at it, Jiraiya had to quickly shield his face as powerful, sizzling goo whipped and lashed at him. Boiling droplets of water pelted his hands with ugly, irritating red blotches. She used a water jutsu to negate my fireball. A thick cloud of steam consumed the area, making it difficult for Jiraiya to see. The mist made the atmosphere feel heavy and uncomfortably humid. He looked bellow, couldn't even make out his feet from all the steam. The hissing of the boiling rapids evaporating against the raging flames then died out, and an eerie silence fell on Jiraiya. Held his breath, focusing all of his attention on his hearing. For a moment, everything remained quiet until he heard the splashing of feet, plodding through pee to the sound. Jiraiya knew that he had pinpointed his target. He dashed on top of her, looming over her from behind. Jiraiya drew his fist back for a devastating sir until his feet stomping through the water gave him away. He followed through with his attack, deciding the time was now. Irio dropped to the ground, slipping Jiraiya's jab from her blind spot. She transitioned into a squatted position. A low kick. Jiraiya prepared his guard to defend, her hands into the muddy surface. Earth-style mobile core. The foundation underneath Jiraiya shot into the air at a nauseating speed. He tried to catch his bearings and swiftly readjust his weight, but Irio swept his legs out him. His vision swung to the skies as he barreled back down to the ground. Expertly, Jiraiya shifted his body. Throwing his hands down below him, he landed a masterful, the protruding pillar of earth. His sight was inverted, but he could see Irio wheeling back a devastating uppercut for his ribs. Using his hands to push off the earthen slab, he was able to brush Pa, landing on his feet at her back. With little time to collect himself, Jiraiya slipped past a heavy sidekick and barely saved his jaw. He jetted to her left and used the mist to his advantage. Slipping a confident grin prodded at the corners of his mouth as he made a new shadow clone with the same transformation. I'll get her with this next one. It wasted no time darting toward Irio's last position. Jiraiya watched the clone disappear into the wisps of mist, circling the area. He waited patiently for his cue. No more hiding, Irio proclaimed with deep frustration. Wind style. Blowing air wave. With one jutsu, Jiraiya witnessed the mist be flushed from the area as the beat against him and tore the grass from the surface. 3 nature transformations is no joke, Jiraiya thought. He closed in on her position. She stared him down, Well, she stared down the clone of him that was Fasten's signature taijutsu stance. Iryo rocketed towards the clone who did the same. Both of them locked fingers in a standoff. The initial struggle between them swiftly ceased as Iryo came to overclone. Time to move! Jiraiya dashed at her exposed flank with blinding speed. Iryo was oblivious as she yanked the clone's arms down and delivered a killing headbutt and burst into a cloud of smoke right in her face. Her eyes widened in terror. Jiraiya reeled his fist back behind his head with conviction. Gotcha! He blindsided her. Drive knuckles right into her jaw with a crushing overhand. Her dark eyes bulged from her head while her jaw was displaced against his fist to a degree of disfigurement. Into the air as her head snapped back from the force, she was sent flying into the ground. Jiraiya watched with a smug air about him as she skipped atop the surfak before she could stop herself. He could physically feel the rage radiating from her glare. She snarled from her low pose on the ground. She rubbed at her cheek as she stood back up. Who or why? Jiraiya rolled his shoulders. Come with me to Konoha and you'll find out, he half-joked. A labored sigh escaped her lips, and she reluctantly settled into a new taijutsu stance. She held her hands straight out from her sides. I'll find out when I knock you. Body transformation. Her hands glistened with the sharp, jagged edges of her blue chakra scalpels. She wants to finish me here. Jiraiya planted his feet firmly on the ground, inviting her to go on the attack. He eyed her carefully, waiting for her to tee him. She lifted her leg into the air and struck the ground with quaking force. The earth groaned as it was split apart with deep cracks and a miasma of chunks of Sadaim uprooted into the sky. Jiraiya felt the rumbling in his legs with the ground shattering beneath him. He leapt into the air, escaping the collapsing sinkhole beneath high too close. He thought as his hands sprung into motion, forming hand sign after hand sign. Eyeing Iryo from above, he completed his counterattack. Lightning style, rolling thunderbolts. He outstretched his hands, which crackled with blue lightning at fingertips and fired strokes of plasma down at Iryo. He fell onto the earth early enough to feel the ripples of the lightning bolts assaulting the ground, fracturing it, spotting her through the clouds of dust and strands of lightning. He saw her gunning for him, dodging the bolts with ease. He flew through another set of seals to prepare his next attack. Try dodging this, he taunted. Water style. Great surging wave. He spat a beam of water from Iryo, which rapidly grew into a towering wave of water. Water and lightning are always a great combo, he smirked. The erupting geyser of water leaving his mouth quickly deteriorated into a flowing stream, but the wave was so huge, he could no longer get sight of his enemy. The water swallowed everything in its path as the lightning danced throughout its surface. A tsunami cloaked in lightning quickly became a barely electrified pool of water only inches deep. As the wave lost its initiative, Jiraiya spotted the cracking, dilapidous stone that trickled water from its surface. She really gambled using an earth jutsu with all that lightning around. Jiraiya wasn't even certain if she was alive and that he wasn't prepared when Iryo dashed through the dome directly at him with breakneck speed. Chakra scalpels at the ready to chop Jiraiya's head off. She shot at swift motion, a straight jab right for his jugular which he only narrowly sidestepped. Her assault did not relent and she pressed on with a sharp swipe right for his head with her other hand which Jiraiya weaved under. His eyes followed her deadly BL swiped at him with a downward chop, about to split his shoulder apart. Jiraiya dashed away from her onslaught, creating distance which is where Iryo threw a misp now. Jiraiya snatched her hand from the air. He yanked her off her feet with all his might and balled his fist for another strike. Her eyes flung open. She was defend Jiraiya. He pulled her toward him as his fist shot upward. Iryo's eyes rolled into the back of her head at the connection of his fist to her chin. Her body spun in the that one. Jiraiya taunted triumphantly. Her body bounced against the ground with a thud before it burst into a cloud of water. The droplets coated Jiraiya, getting in his face. A water clone? The puddle to the left of him sloshed upward. Time seemed to flow slower as his head snapped toward the noise. His eyes dilated watching her race toward him with scalpel. Her shirt had been seared at the shoulder. He definitely hit her with that lightning. Jiraiya gritted his teeth with finality and held his palm out. A whirlwind gathered at his palm, swirling into a compact yellow ball that grew and grew until it was larger than his hand. His countenance was stern. This is the end of the line. Iryo's face flooded with surprise at the sight of it. Jiraiya rushed in to meet her chakra scalpel. Rasengan, blue clashed with intense force. Jiraiya felt the vibrations within his bones. The attacks exploded on each other, blowing up in Jiraiya's face. He was sent soaring Tachar like a white bullet with a red casing. He choked out the breath in his throat after slamming into a tree and landing face first into the water that blanketed the surface. He struggled to pull his face out of suffocating water for a moment. Perching his weight on his left hand, he peeled his face from the ground to examine the aftermath. What remained was a crater to the ground, revealing the scarred earth beneath. Jiraiya suddenly felt a debilitating burning pain in his hand that traveled up to his elbow. He scrutinized his right arm. It was like a blade lashed around his entire AR that spiraled from the wrist to the elbow, was gushing blood into the puddles beneath him. "Nothing bandages won't resolve," he mumbled. He rubbed his white hair out of his face. It was hard to keep out of his eyes without his head protector on. A sudden sense of shock struck him. "My hair is white." Jiraiya examined his reflection in the mirror-like puddles. Indeed, his transformation had broken. If my transformation broke, then surely... He scanned the area FO was. She crawled through a hole in the side of the building. Must have gone through it with the explosion. Wisps of steam rolled off her arm. It was totally healed. Was off. The roots of her hair were becoming blonde. Her eyes were developing into a brown pigment. Even her white coat evolved into a green haori. The giveaway diamond on her forehead. Jiraiya could hardly hear the gasps of shock from all the onlookers. A nefarious grin crept onto his face. "I knew it was you, Tsunade." The end for part 1. Let's get 25 likes for part 2.